On this episode of the John 1911 podcast, the Great Khan of Nebraska, shooting from the Coyote door, was China wiped out by COVID, and Watchtower Firearms goes bankrupt. Okay, good morning everybody. This is Kraken and Marky, and this is episode 366 of the John 1911 podcast. Shit, I didn't look up what date it was. It's 9:45 a.m. Thursday, March 6th. Today is Thursday. And I have a special treat here. Kraken has come in, and he is at the John 1911 range. The Great Khan of Nebraska has made an appearance, and we've been hanging out doing stuff, and we were shooting yesterday, and well, he was shooting real good. I was shooting like shit. But in my defense, none of my shit was zeroed. But the problem is that doesn't work because none of his shit was zeroed either. But he was still out shooting me. So, how you been?
Make sure we're spelling con right. It's not C-O-N.
Oh, good point. No. We didn't have target cameras up, but I got to be honest. You were making some good shots out to about 400 yards.
Well, I had a pretty good spotter helping me out with wind calls too.
Well, it was fucking weird because I would call a hold, and you would get a hit, and then we took turns, and I'm trying to shoot. I'm doing the same holds, and I wasn't hitting shit. It's like, well, it's the thing that's changed is the shooter, not the hold call. So obviously, Kraken was out shooting the hell out of me yesterday. So. How you feeling? How long is the drive to get here from the Great Khan of... How long does it take the Great Khan of Nebraska to get here?
Well, you factor in 2 fuel stops for diesel and a pit stop here and there, and just about 12 hours.
That's not bad. That's like driving from here to Washington, D.C.
Yeah. It's interstate all the way, so, I mean, it's really not a horrible drive. Mm-hmm. By the end of the drive, you start feeling it, but... Not, it loops me around St. Louis, so really don't have bad traffic there, and I loop around Kansas City, and, then it's just pedal to the metal.
Okay, so I don't know how diesel really works anymore with, I know diesels, you get better gas mileage than gassers, right?
I'm getting better gas mileage than my F-150 I had. One of the things about diesels is they tell you don't even really worry about mileage now till you get about 10,000 miles on them. I've got about 2,500 on mine.
Oh, that's a new truck.
Yeah. And I'll get, just straight highway, cruise control set on 70, not bucking any big winds. I'll get 22 out of it right now.
Oh, hell, you're
with
beating
good
me.
Diesel. Winter blend's killing me mileage-wise. I dropped down to about 20 on winter blend.
Wow. So my 5.7 gasser, V8 gasser Toyota, I get between 13 and 14 miles per gallon. And if the best I've ever gotten is I drove from Cincinnati to Fort Bragg, and it was all highway, just went down 77, and I got up to 16 miles a gallon. And I'm also running 92 or 93 octane gas, like really high octane. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, those Toyotas are not known for getting good gas mileage. Like if that's, they'll last 1,000,000 miles, but no, if you're counting gas mileage, you'll be crying with them Toyotas. They suck the gas. So
yeah.
Well, what do you think of your Ed Brown getting worked on?
I'll tell you what, I was really impressed with the machinist that did it. Paul did an outstanding job. Very humble man. It was very fun to talk to him, very knowledgeable. And one of the interesting things he brought up on that Ed Brown, he said that is the second straightest barrel that he's ever turned.
Paul is, I call Paul, he's basically our John 1911. He does all of our high-end machine work. He doesn't call himself a gunsmith. He doesn't bill himself as a gunsmith. He's a competitive rifle shooter who owns a machine shop. And so he knows his way around guns, and he knows his way, around the machine shop. And he said your barrel was the second straightest, and the most straightest barrel he's ever turned was a Gardner Gap barrel on a 308, that FBI HRT rifle, if anyone's curious. And actually, that rifle belongs to Officer Mike on our website, so I thought that was interesting. But I was kind of surprised. We went over there to I guess we should tell the listener, like, that barrel on that Ed Brown is like you call that a bull barrel or heavyweight barrel? What is that thing? It's like
it's a heavy contour, or back in the day, it would have probably been referred to as a bull barrel.
Yeah, I mean, if that thing was any bigger, I could use it as a gutter pipe.
Yeah, I haven't mic'd it, but it's probably 960 or even maybe a full inch at the muzzle.
That barrel is a pig. I mean, it shoots really good, but man, that barrel's a pig. It makes that gun so front heavy, but, you know.
Soaks up the recoil, though, so it's actually in 300 Win Mag. It's very pleasant to shoot recoil-wise.
Yeah, that's true.
You can sit behind that thing all day.
That's true. You gonna try to hunt coyotes with it?
Yeah, it might make a mess of a coyote.
Yeah, I'm not planning on keeping it. Do you keep coyotes when you shoot them?
No.
You know?
No.
I know one guy who, he sent me pictures. He's a cop. They were doing, the tags to knock the coyotes back, and he sent me a picture of this coyote that was like a golden brown color. He's like, this is the prettiest coyote I've ever seen. And I mean, he's like, I was almost ashamed to throw it in the dumpster. So he took a picture of it. It's like, I mean, it looked so good. It was almost like, what dumpster is that in?
Right.
So yeah,
I mean, if I'm sitting in the deer condominium and a coyote wants to unalive himself out there, you know, I'm not going to pass him up, but
yeah,
I'm not going to hump that thing around, you know, calling coyotes on a winter night. That's for sure.
So we did some real shooting for the first time from the coyote door here at the John 911 range, and unexpectedly we had bad weather yesterday. Like, I was surprised. Like, I expected some rain early in the day, but I mean, it was blowing. I mean, I thought that looked like it was flurries or sleet. It was blowing sideways.
Oh, we had probably sustained 30, 35 mile an hour crosswinds.
Yeah. But we were pretty warm up there.
It's my fault. Every time I come out here, you know, I bring crappy weather with me.
Well, I mean, you know, yeah, the last time you were here, it was 5 degrees. So
for a high.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're doing real good. You know,
you're getting me trained.
We were up to 68, 70 degrees just like 2 or 3 days ago.
Yeah.
So, and it's 32 degrees now outside. So, but I thought, you know, upstairs, now that I can say up because we're here, I mean, I thought we didn't get really cold up there. I wasn't running a heater, but heat's coming through the floor from the living quarters. But I mean, even the wind blowing basically kind of straight in that window, it wasn't really.
No, it wasn't bad at all.
So, you know, I get you called it a milk house. What did you call it? A
milk house heater.
A milk house heater. And, you know, I mean, I should be able to shoot up there all year. Like, I mean, even if it's like crazy cold. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll start hunting deer out here. You know, if Bullwinkle wants to walk across that rifle range. So we've got pretty consistent 400-yard shots from up there. You know, I don't know how the hunting's actually going to work, and because one of the issues if somebody would be hunting up there is it would limit the amount of hunting that could happen on the. You know, you would have to close down half the property for there to be another hunter in back, because from that coyote position, you're dominating the front half of the property.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, it's like, you know, I would think that, you know, if anyone's gonna hunt, like if I'm gonna have some of the cops out here, I don't know if I would even have anybody up there. Why there's other hunters. You know, they're not on the rifle range, but they're past the rifle range, and they're in valleys, but.
Bullets do funny things when they start hitting trees and rocks and dirt. And
well, cops do funny things when they get tired and get bored and get up out of their shooting position and start, you know, maybe like heading back to the barn, and they walk into a field of fire. So I just, you know, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that one. I haven't quite decided yet. So, did the suppressor, the Ed Brown rifle? Oh, by the way, if you don't know, if you're listening to this and you're like, Ed Brown, Why are they talking about rifles? Ed Brown doesn't make rifles. Apparently, Kraken called Ed Brown, and someone at Ed Brown told him, yeah, they never made rifles either. And it's like, well, yeah, they did. But that suppressor didn't walk really too much on that gun, did it? It's just because we didn't do it's just direct thread. So, I thought it worked real well. So, speaking of which, Ed Brown and rifles. I sent you a picture. Did you see the proof that Ed Brown did make rifles? If you go to Ed Brown passed away last year, and he some of his private collection is the family's putting it up for sale, and there's a prototype rifle that Ed Brown made in 308 for sale right now on their website, and it's called the SSR. It's the Savannah Survival Rifle. And so Ed Brown had a rifle called the Savannah. It's like a slimmer hunting rifle. This gun is in 308. It has a scope on it. I don't know what the individual scope he has on this gun, but he also has iron sights on it, basically safari sights. I think it's got a hooded front sight. I can't remember what the rear sight was. On top of it is a mount and a scope, and then the stock is woodland camo. So it's not the same stock that he used on his Marine Corps sniper rifle, I don't believe, but it's got that pattern, and I gotta tell you, I've been thinking about buying that gun. I mean, I just like, but the thing is, I don't know, it's so unique and rare. It'd almost be a shame to shoot it, but I'd be shooting the hell out of it. And, it's like, I don't know, can I justify? I think they want $6,000 for it. And if you think about it, $6,000 for the, for the rifle with scope on it isn't terrible. I mean, it's not a bad price, really.
No, and anymore, when you start looking at custom rifles, $6,000 is really not a lot of money into a custom-built rifle.
Yeah, and
a lot of these precision guys are putting way more than that into a rifle nowadays. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. What was the? I'm gonna look it up on the website here real quick. What was the long guns? It is that's they have a Demera for sale. They have a 6mm Remington Demera bolt action for $42.95. And then the Ed Brown Savannah SSR is $6,000. And what's the scope on it? Because Ed always liked, I'm expecting it is, because I knew Ed. So it is a Swarovski. It's the 4-12 AV scope with a TDS Plex reticle. So the reticle isn't like real super modern, but it's Swaro glass, because Ed generally didn't do crappy glass on his personal gun. So for $6,000, you're getting a lot of gun with a nice piece of glass on it. I mean, I think it's a hell of a deal. And what's interesting about what I always liked about these Ed Brown guns is it's his hybrid action, just like your gun that we were shooting yesterday. It's like a combination of the Remington 700 and a Winchester Model 70. I like the 3-position, like the Winchester 70 action, where it's got the 3-position safety, and he's got that on all of his guns, on a lot of his guns. And because my original sniper rifle, precision rifle that I shot was what I learned on, was trained on, was a what's that FBI gun, the green one, made by FN. I can't whatever the G3 with the green. I can't remember what they called it. SPR A3G maybe, or whatever it was. So anyway, it has that kind of safety on it. So I'm looking at it, and I think it's kind of interesting. I thought it was a cool gun and all that. So I don't know. We're just kind of hanging out.
You want to get into the big safety debate we had yesterday?
The safety debate. Which safety? I don't remember. Which one was that?
Your gun's not working. The trigger's not working. That's because it's unsafe. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Red, you're dead.
Oh. What kind of gun is like? That's a new gun, right?
That was that Springfield Armory 2020 22 long rifle, target rifle.
So he's got some little 22 bolt action gun, and I'm used to. It's confusing. The safety on this gun confused me because I'm putting it. From my position, when I'm looking at the gun, no matter if the gun is on safe or off safe, I can see both the red and the white at the same time. So I am putting the safety lever on the red to activate the gun, but the way this gun is set up, you put the safety lever, like you completely clear. If you complete, like, you're partially obscuring the color codes when you move this safety, and so I can see the colors, so I'm taking it as whatever color the lever's on is what the condition of the gun, but they configured it to whatever color is not 100% obscured is the condition of the gun. Do I have that right? I know I just butchered that, but. That's why I can't work the safety on this gun.
So trying to make it a little clearer, the safety on this is very similar to the way the safety's activated on a Remington 700. Mm-hmm. It's above the grip of the stock, and it's
on the right
just
side.
A flip forward and backward.
Yeah.
So when you're looking down at it, you flip it back, and the safety knob covers up the white dot. You can actually completely see the red dot.
Yeah, but
and then when you flip it forward, you're completely looking straight down at it. You're completely covering the red dot, and you can see the white dot. And the way I was always taught to look at a gun and tell if it was safe or not was if you could see red means you're dead. The gun will fire. So we were always taught red, you're dead means the gun's hot and ready to go. If you can't see red, then the gun's on safe. You still have to maintain trigger and muzzle discipline, but the gun's technically on safe when you can't see the red.
Well, yeah, but you can see the red in all conditions on this gun.
Well, if you're looking under it.
I was looking at it. I can see the red. Maybe you need glasses, but I can see the red. I don't know what to tell you. So, like the Blotter is when you can, when you put it, when you take it off safe, you see the red. Because it's a slider and it uncovers the red.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
so red, you're dead.
Yeah, well, and then the slider, it completely covers, the red when it's on safe. Like this gun was confusing me because I could see the color, mm-hmm. and so I thought I was selecting the condition, not in the condition. That makes.
But your Blotter's really neat because the way your safety is, it's on the back of the bolt. Mm-hmm. So there's just no way that you can miss what condition the gun is in. It's really a pretty slick setup.
Yeah, well the thing is, that is not uncommon in Europe. Like all these guns, a lot of these guns put the safety on the back so you can see the condition of the gun when you're looking down your scope. The only thing that kind of maybe some people don't like about the Blotter is you'll notice I don't know, did you work that safety when you were shooting it a little bit?
A couple times, yeah.
And you notice how heavy the safety is? Mm-hmm. That's because you're cocking the gun. And so, if you're used to just like a little push, like the slider on that 22, it mm-hmm. takes nothing to flip that safety. On that Blotter, if you're not used to putting your hand in a position to be able to put at least a couple pounds of pressure, you can't take that gun off safe. Because you're literally cocking and decocking the entire gun. Yeah. So the Blotter, when you put the Blotter gun on safe, you've actually completely killed the gun. Mm-hmm. The gun is completely decocked. You could beat it with a hammer, it can't fire. So it's because of all that. It's just how they do stuff in Europe. It's just a different way of doing things. So there's advantages and disadvantages to it. So I don't know, well, let's talk about. Do you want to talk about guns or do you want to talk about politics? What are we going to talk about?
Your choice. You're the host. I can get spooled up on either subject. So
Well, once we talk about politics, we're never going to get off of it. So let's finish on some guns.
Yeah.
Have you heard of a company called Watchtower Firearms?
no, I have not.
I had never heard of them either. Have you ever heard of a company called F1 Firearms?
Vaguely familiar, but not enough I could speak on it.
Okay, so I don't know who any of these companies are, but this showed up on the news. A gun manufacturer known for its high-end rifles and military-style firearms files for bankruptcy, and I'm like, who? Watchtower Firearms, a Texas-based manufacturer, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy at the end of last month. Watchtower, which set up shop in 2022, so it's dead by 2025, made its name for itself by catering to civilian, military, and law enforcement markets. So does catering mean that you didn't actually sell to military and law enforcement? Like, I never heard of these people. Like, what military? I think the word catering is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this sentence. Catering, like,
Sounds a little fluffy.
Yeah, we're catering. It's like, my old boss told me one time, as an aside, we were going through some of their social media, and I discovered that some Navy SEALs had come through the facility, and I'm like, dude, why don't we have this like on our website? Like, why don't we, we'll talk about like Navy SEALs and stuff. And he goes, listen, first of all, they came through here. We don't have a contract. I don't know who paid for them to come here. I don't know if they paid for themselves, if their commands paid. I have no idea. They just showed up. They just kind of trickled through, a couple of them, and they trickled out. We never saw them again. And he said, so we don't have a contract for that. I don't want to bill for that. And he gave me a piece of advice I never forgot. He said, never put something on your resume you have to defend. I never forgot that. Because it's like, yeah, you could say Navy SEALs have trained at this facility, but he was like, nah, we're not putting that bullshit on our fucking website. We have all kinds of people that come through, onesies and twosies, but it's not like we have a contract or it's official. And it was like, yeah, so Watchtower Firearms catering to military. It's like, I don't know, brother. That seems like whatever. But that's not why I brought this up. Like, who cares? Like, this company I've never heard of. Apparently, they also last year acquired F1 Firearms in its attempt to expand. So as a business person, I can tell you, they were in trouble from the get-go. They weren't making enough money. So they tried to buy market share. That tells me this company's never made money. Not that and I definitely would understand companies that don't make money. I'm not familiar with that concept. So apparently they got a big shout out after Don Jr. brought his son to the luxury manufacturer's facility to buy some kind of AR-15. Watchtower was led by former Raytheon executives and veterans. But this is what caught my attention. Blitz through influencer deals to raise brand awareness. Social media ambassadors included artists, competitive shooters, and content creators like Nick Pewview Johnson and former Arizona Republican State candidate Mark Lamb. But anyway, so it fell apart. Now, I just recently saw who Pewview is. Like, for just some reason, YouTube showed him to me on the internet. And he's a guy, he's a hell of a shooter, but he's kind of a trick shooter. And like, he's a guy that would do these videos where he would take a shotgun shell and set it like between his barrel and his mag tube, and he would flip it up in the air and it would land and then he would close it and fire it. He does all that kind of stuff, but he's a real good shooter. But I don't really watch his kind of content because I'm just not interested in that kind of content. But apparently he was getting paid. These dudes are getting paid. Why don't we get paid? Why are you not saying anything? Why the fuck aren't we getting paid? Are you getting paid?
You're the one with the pen.
Yes,
I know how to endorse a check.
Yeah, I'm like,
I mean, if this is a sticking point for you, just bust that checkbook right out, brother.
I don't understand. Like, I'm like, so
how do all these guys that nobody's heard of, wind up getting paid to do stuff that we're out here spending money to do?
I mean, it's like, I'm like, okay, like, so Texas Redditor joked, Products sold for anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000. The Apache double stack 9mm sold for 40. So, oh, that's a 2011, which I'm not a fan of. But I'm just like, this company, like we get companies, like we got, we get companies. I'm noticing now probably every week who are like reaching out, they're like, hey. Can we do something with you? Like a lot of times, like we had a guy reach out recently and he wrote a book. I think it was on hunting, like Africa hunting, and he wanted, hey, can we do an interview on your podcast? So, you know, promote my book. And I'm like, no. I mean, it's not really something that people would listen to us for. Yeah. But, you know, we're about shooting guns and having fun and you know, jaw jacking around. But it's like, apparently I'm just thinking, and there's like all kinds of shit that I'm just not even, all these opportunities, either we're doing this wrong or I'm leaving money on the table. I don't know. Like how, like I had heard, what was it? And I'm not criticizing because I mean, these people obviously do this full time and like, it's how they make their money. You know who Iraq IV8888 is, or Iraq veteran? No. Kraken doesn't know who IVF. That I actually kind of really respect that. That's really, I'm actually impressed by that. He's a YouTube. Ever seen Chad and Eric on YouTube?
I'm gonna be honest. I don't watch a lot of the YouTube gun videos because, in my opinion, they're either a bunch of gear queers just trying to push product, or a lot of times to me it's gimmicky shooting, just trying to monetize and get clicks. The little bit of YouTube video content I watch of shooting is of people that, you know, I may personally know or have trained with, and I value their content. I feel like I can get something from it. You know, Hickok 45, I've seen a couple of these videos. It's like, oh, that's cool, but that's entertainment for me.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to really learn.
So if I'm watching gun content, I want to learn something.
Yeah, I like Hickok 45, and he's a very nice man if I'm in the mood for it. But there's really not much to learn unless he's got some gun that he's shooting that I've never seen before, and it's like, oh, I'd like to. Tell me about the riboflavin 47. Yeah. That, you know, like, oh, Hickok's got one. But yeah, but I remember there's apparently a price sheet that goes around for some of these biggest influencers. I guess that's why they're called influencers. Where if you pay X amount of money, you know, they'll review your product or do videos on your product. And I seem to remember that for IV80, Iraq veteran 8888, at least in the past, I thought it was $4,000, or maybe it was $12,000. But you had to, but they have a fairly large following. But I mean, it's fairly significant money, you know. But you know, for me, the problem is, even if I was getting paid, I don't know how you feel about it, but just, you know, if there's a piece of equipment or even a firearm that I don't want to buy. And then it's like, hey, riboflavin 47 showed up. Let's go out and make a video. Okay. Like, we have to shoot a gun that I'm not interested in. I don't really care about. It's just hard to stay juiced for it. Yeah. And it just, to me, that's just agony. You know, it's like, I don't want to, shooting guns and having fun is our motto, and shooting a gun I don't want to shoot doesn't sound like fun to me.
I've got a little bit of a different take. I don't know if you remember, it was a publication, and they failed after about 3 or 4 years because their whole business model was they accepted absolutely no advertising, and they were a gun review magazine, and if they were going to say review a Glock 19. They just picked a random Joe's gun shop, went in, bought one, brought it back, did a standardized, you know, for pistols. They had we do this, we do this, we do this. And then they gave an honest review. And if the gun was a piece of shit, they literally said, this gun is a piece of shit. And they accepted no advertising because their premise was, I can't call a Ruger XYZ a piece of shit and then accept a $5,000 check and run a Ruger ad on the next page over for a Ruger XYZ pistol.
Well, the reality is what happens is you say the Ruger's a piece of shit. You may notice that the advertising dollars for the next 3 or next quarter or 2 quarters from Ruger suddenly dries up.
And it would from other companies too. So one of the things they did in their first several issues was they kind of gave an everyman's guide to deciphering gun reviews in the standard gun rags, you know, Guns and Ammo, American Rifleman, stuff like that. So, you know, they kind of educated people on how to pick up if maybe a gun wasn't very good. So, you know, little keywords like, you know, fit and finish could be a little better, tolerances could be a little tighter, but overall it's a decent shooter, was kind of, you know, say early 1990s gun code for the gun's a piece of shit without querying the $5,000 full page color ad for that gun 2 pages later. So it didn't, so, you know, you never really, you know, when did Guns and Ammo or any of the other gun magazines, I'm not singling them out, that's just the one that pops up into my head, you know, when did they ever come out and say, you know, this gun's a total turd, stay away?
Yeah, that's true.
They would
the
kind of in a left-handed way say, this is one you should stay away from.
Gun magazines are kind of gone now.
Yeah.
And it used to be like, before kind of gun forums and the internet really took over, but somebody had made an observation. When was the last time you read a negative review in a gun magazine?
Exactly.
It never happened. And but I seem to recall, and I believe it held up to be true, that American Rifleman is the NRA magazine, right?
Yeah.
I always heard American Rifleman was pretty squared away. They never, maybe they wouldn't report on a gun that did bad. Maybe they just wouldn't publish it. But everything that they tested and did and wrote about guns in the American Rifleman generally was considered to be true. Mm-hmm. So maybe they just never.
I think they selectively picked what they reviewed and published.
I'm sure they just, you know, if something went terrible, they just sent it back and be like, dude, we can't fucking do this article.
You don't want us to really do a write-up on this one.
Well, the closest I ever got to really doing a review, and again, it's not that, you know, like I don't want to come off like I'm some like arrogant like gun dick or like gun snob or like, you know, these people that are like, I'm tier 1 operator, night elf, mohawk, space shuttle door gunner. I mean, I'm as susceptible as anybody else to, you know, like whatever widget or whatever product, and occasionally one of them hits me and goes, oh, that's kind of interesting. And the last one that I did, and it went terribly, and I'm not trying to crap on him, but just you can find this, Rob Pincus had come out with a gun, and is a little pocket rocket, and I don't like pocket rocket guns. It just doesn't matter if they're 1911s. It doesn't matter if they're Glock. I just don't generally like little itty bitty guns. I'm a bigger person. It's easier to carry a bigger gun for me, especially appendix. I mean, it's just the bigger the gun, it's easier to carry up to a certain point. And so, but this gun was a little pocket rocket gun they'd come up with. It was striker fired, but I think it was in 9mm, and it took 1911 single stack magazines. And I was like, I don't know why. It looked. I think they were kind of trying to bill it as a commander. Like they made it as like a commander-sized gun. It took single-stack magazines, but it was a striker gun. And I'm like, okay. I mean, like that. I don't know. Like I have 9mm magazines. I got good ones, and it just. I don't know. Like maybe that'd be a good gun to have in the reference collection, and maybe pull it out if I ever wanted some little pocket gun. And so we reached out to that company. I can't remember what it's even called, and it was just like in the past year or two, and said, hey, can you send over a T&E for us, and, you know, we'll probably buy it. Anyway, it went so bad. Like, the gun would eject brass into its own, I mean, it would literally, the brass would eject, turn around, and land back in the ejection port and jam the gun up.
Oh.
And I was shooting it, and I was like, you know, like, there's only so much time in the day, and I want to shoot content, so we have video content, because I have to maintain a schedule, and so I was out there literally right here behind here in the pit, and I was shooting it, just kind of get used to it, and off camera, it did this, and I was like, damn it, I wish I even made a comment on a camera. I said, hey, I just had something happen that I have not seen happen in like 15 or 17 years. Last time I saw this happen, this weird statistical anomaly where a piece of brass bounces funny and lands back in the ejection port and jams up a gun. Like it can happen. It's pretty rare. And so I'm shooting the gun, 3 shots later or something, it does it again. And then it's doing it again. Like it did it 4 or 5 times on video. And I was like, holy shit, this is a fucking problem. Like this gun doesn't work. And, and part of my issue was, and, which is I guess not fair. It's not that it's not fair, because we reached out to this company because I was legitimately interested in this gun. But the problem is I've only got so much time to make content, to film it, to edit it, to publish it, because, we don't want to go dark forever. There's always it's like a hunger. Like, ooh, we got to get a podcast out. Mm-hmm. Ooh, we got to get video up. I got to get a post up. I try to have a new post on the website. Well, I had burned my time for that day shooting this fucking piece of shit. And it's like, I got bad news. I mean, I hate to say this, but this is getting published because I'm not going to miss my publishing schedule because this gun doesn't fucking work. I mean, I asked for the gun. And it's like, well, this is what happened. This is the truth. And I'm not one of those guys, because some people, what happens is they like stuff to break because they want the drama. And they always make it doesn't matter what it is. For $5,000, this gun shouldn't break. For $5,000, this gun shouldn't jam. For $5,000, this gun shouldn't miss. For $5,000, this gun shouldn't need oil. For $5,000, this gun shouldn't need break-in. For $5,000, this gun should come with 15 magazines. But what ends up happening is it doesn't matter how much you spend. There's going to be some dude that's out there that's going to be like, for $100, this gun shouldn't break. For $100, this gun shouldn't jam. For $100, this gun shouldn't miss. It doesn't matter. It's always, whatever the money is, there's going to be someone that's not happy. And so I'm not trying to find shit to crap on. It's just, I felt like what bothered me most about this gun was the amount of time I wasted on it. And I was like, well, I've already wasted time on this gun. I'm not going to buy the gun, but I'm certainly not going to miss my publishing cycle and, not publish. And I'm like, well, I recorded it. It's getting published. And we sent it back. We never heard from them again, which I'm not like, what would, like, even if they had been like, hey, we'd like to send you another gun, my interest in the gun went away. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like, I wasn't like, hey, they were paying me. They didn't know who we were. But,
And for me, if I'm going to review a piece of gear that I'm interested in, I want to go buy it off the rack. I don't want one that's been massaged by, their top gunsmith in the company to make sure that it runs right. And this is another one of the reasons, this publication back in the early 90s, they didn't even go to the same gun shop to buy guns. They would just go all around the local market, buy one. So they were just, Joe Six-Pack, buying a Glock off the shelf just like I would have, and then gave it an honest review. And to me, in my opinion, what I see on YouTube is, okay, so this guy's getting paid to do this, or at least getting a free gun out of the deal. So you get one of two things.
Do they get free guns?
A lot of times they do.
We don't get free guns.
Maybe you're not talking to the right guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. But you're making money off this review. So you've either got to shit on it for drama because that gets clicks, or you got to say, it's got, beer flavored nipples and does everything, but cook your dinner.
Okay. Whoa. Okay. Hold on. I'm hanging with you. I'm trying.
Because they gave you, this $2,000 gun, and you want the next one they make too, so you can't shit on them. So you're not getting an honest review either way. And then everybody, what works really well for you and what you like about a gun may not work well for me. So there's a few guys that, you know, if I find that they're reviewing something I've got some interest in, I may take a look at it, but it doesn't really influence my decision in viewing content or buying gear. If I'm interested in something, I'll either get it myself or I'll find somebody I know that has one and say, hey, I want to shoot this because I'm thinking about getting one. I won't necessarily get on YouTube and, you know, Joe Blow, veteran 89, whatever, likes it, so it must be good, because their motives may not be pure.
Do you think a lot of these guys, so like for the record, so this had come up the other day or yesterday, you and I were discussing this, you know, these, in the past I was running Ed Brown 1911s when I was working. And in the past, I was running Ed Browns, and these days I run some Wilson guns, and I've bought every one of these Wilson guns. Mm-hmm. Like there's no like giving shit for free. I'm not being whatever, and there's none of this like, oh, we'll sell to you for $1. Like there's none of that either. Like it's real mm-hmm. money, but it's. Do you think a lot of these guys, instead of not getting, okay, so let me ask this question. Because there's two, you touched on something, and then there's another issue I want to circle in with the gun influencer thing. From a business perspective, one of the things that people have discovered is, and it doesn't matter if it's Netflix, it doesn't matter if it's any kind of streaming service like, you know, Peacock, CNN Plus, all of this stuff, you can't just survive on monthly membership dues. You have to sell advertising. That's why you're seeing advertising coming back. So ads work. So the idea of having a media company and you're not accepting advertising monetarily is a loser. Like, I mean, there's only two examples that I can come up with that I know for a fact that they lose money every year on their business model. Is Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. He loses $100 million a year. And Marky owns John 1911, and he loses a year. So it's a lot. So I don't bemoan the idea of taking advertising. You need advertising. And I'm not adverse to taking advertising for John 1911 in the future, especially if they kick us off YouTube. We have John 1911 set up where in the future, if I needed to turn it into an actual video platform service that can insert John 1911 right now is set up. If somebody wanted to pay us money and say, hey, can we insert a commercial in your videos? Every video that we've published, going back 10 years, this is our 10th year, I can insert commercials into those videos. I can insert them in for X amount of time, and then when the check doesn't clear, I can pull those out. I've never done it, but I have the ability to do it. So I'm not going to sit here and say that, you know, I'm against advertising. We are set up to accept commercial advertising in the future. I just don't feel like we're big enough to justify, like, you know, I don't know, like we're like, hey, can we run a commercial? And I, you know, look at the numbers and be like, I don't know, $100. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't even, it's not worth it yet to run ads, and I would be embarrassed. Like, I wouldn't ask for $100,000 because we're not worth $100,000, and I'd be too embarrassed to ask for what we're worth. I'm just being honest. But with that being said, are people that are going around saying, we don't accept any monetary compensation, are they getting compensated by, do they get a gun, get it in for review, make their content with it, and then all of a sudden, magically, that gun ends up on Gunbroker at 80% of its MSRP, barely used, and then that's how they're getting paid? I don't know if that's true. I've wondered if that's true.
Yeah. You know, or at the very least, you know, you get a $2,500 pistol for, you know, an afternoon of shooting and a little bit of video, and some editing and put it on your page, and you're not getting a check stroke to you for doing it, but you're getting a free $2,500 pistol to throw in your gun locker.
Well, but if you're doing it as a side hustle, or as a, just like a hobby, that's fine. But if you actually are doing it as a job, you can't take a $2,500 pistol and pay your mortgage.
No, but to your point, you can turn around and sell them.
Sell it. So I just wonder.
Or sell advertising for your site that you're doing it on, or there's ways to monetize it without necessarily getting a check stroke from SIG to review a pistol.
Yeah, and I just thought,
you get your pistol from SIG, but because of the content, you can sell some advertising, or you can sell swag, or such as that, and monetize it in other ways.
Yeah, I just you look at some of these, and I just explained, even as a business model, how John 1911, if we were to grow to a certain point, we have the ability to turn on ways to take people's money. Like I will take advertisers' money if we're ready to do that. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's terrible that other people do it. But you look at a guy like who. I don't know, you don't know who, whatever. Have you ever seen a YouTube channel called Military Arms Channel? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So, all right, Kraken at least knows one YouTube channel. All right. So, Military Arms Channel, I guess they call him Mac, but Mac isn't his name. So we'll just call him Mac. I get the feeling when he first started, he was a guy not that dissimilar from me, who liked a certain type of gun, military style guns, had a collection, and was just doing videos for whatever his goal was out of his collection. And then at some point, it is turned into, I feel like they send him guns, there's some kind of relationship. He admits that he's not hiding it, but it's somewhere between when he started doing his channel, it was just a dude showing his gun collection, and now he does videos, and he's like, his latest ones, he's getting all these videos from, or all these, he seems to have a bunch of guns from, is it PSA, who does the H&R, who's doing all the repop guns? Is it PSA?
PSA does a lot of repops. H&R does some repops.
Well, H&R is a name under PSA right now.
I'm not sure what the structure of that is anymore. They used to be their own company.
Well, they used to be, but I believe that they bought, when Remington went out, they ended up buying that name. So like have you seen the DOE, the Department of Energy repop? Mm-hmm. Little 9mm straight blowback AR, mm-hmm. That's made by PSA under the H&R brand. Well, he's getting the H&R A2. He's getting the DOE gun, and I don't know if he's getting them because he's buying them for his collection. I don't know if he's getting them because he has a big following and it's kind of an advertiser arrangement, or I don't know if he's getting them because I believe he has an FFL. Doesn't he own a gun store now in Indiana?
Yeah,
and
sure.
Maybe he's getting inventory that way than pulling, like, I don't know, like, I guess what I'm getting at is he to the point as a YouTuber, it got to the point where he's getting so many guns, free guns, that it really just makes more sense to have an FFL, a commercial, because at some point you have to kind of explain some of this mm-hmm. to ATF as well. Like ATF certainly knows who John 1911, how we all work, and they've actually been like, they want us to get like they want us to get an FFL. It's been going on for a couple of years. That has a lot to do with a lot of the construction and moving we've been doing. But, I don't know how a lot of this works. I don't pay that much attention to it. Do you know who Matt from Demolition Ranch is?
Seen a few of the videos, yeah.
Have you heard that he's retiring?
No.
He's come out and he's saying that he's going to quit YouTube.
Is he the one that had some, like, personal life issues that kind of blew up here? I don't know, 6, 8 months, a year ago.
No, that's
Well, I think we talked about it on pod.
That's Grand Thumb.
Okay, yeah.
The guy, apparently, it doesn't make any sense to me. Apparently likes to get women pregnant. I don't understand this thing, like fetishing thing. I don't know. Like, I come from a generation that was like the worst thing that could happen to you. Like, I don't, okay, but maybe I'm not hold on, I'm going to try to use a young phrase. Maybe I'm not Chad enough to understand, but I'm like, I'm reading this, and I'm like, I don't understand what I'm reading here. This makes no sense to me. It's like someone saying, I love hitting myself in the head with a hammer. Like, I just, okay, but what's the upside? I just love hitting myself in the head with a hammer. Or I just love getting women pregnant. It's like, what? Okay, whatever, dude. But no, this guy, he is in Texas. He's the guy that would do all this goofy shit. Like, I know who he is, but I never really consume his content because he would do shit that you and I wouldn't like. He would take nails and put them in a shotgun shell and then try to shoot and see what would happen. Or he would,
try and shoot a 50 cal through 4 refrigerators.
Exactly.
That's gimmicky shit.
That's exactly what he
stuff that to me some redneck would watch that and go, "Hey, Billy Bob, we got a couple old refrigerators out back. Let's see what we can shoot through them," and then somebody gets hurt.
Well, I did.
Kind of like the old. I used to watch the Tannerite videos.
Did you see the video of the guy that put the Tannerite in the refrigerator? And then they shot it, and the refrigerator, was it a refrigerator door? Come flying back, almost hit the guy.
No more comment on Tannerite videos.
Oh, okay.
I intend to invoke my Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination.
Something tells me, is there a YouTube video out there of you?
No, I was smart enough to never YouTube any of it, but I've seen some damn crazy. Did you ever see the Tannerite video where the guy blew up an entire barn?
Yes, I did see that.
Yeah, that wasn't terribly far from where I had no part of it, but not.
Did you hear it?
It's in my neck of the woods.
You were
we'll say.
What was that noise?
That was one of them. Why didn't I think of that? I mean, anybody can blow up an old Ford F-150 with Tannerite. Let's do a whole barn.
Yeah, he spent. Look, I'm not opposed to. I'm not opposed to the whole like shooting 4 refrigerators, but to me, like, actually sounds kind of fun. But to me, it's like a knock joke.
Mm-hmm. It's a gimmick.
It's like knock, who's there? I got this really funny joke. Who? Here's the joke. Oh my gosh, that's so hilarious. And then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And I think that's the point that this Demolition Ranch guy was making. Is he basically got on YouTube and said, I'm paraphrasing. I'm using my AI mind to give you a summation of what he kind of was saying. But basically, he's like, I'm bored. I'm over it. I'm done. I don't have the passion anymore. How many ballistics gel dummies can I blow up?
Yeah.
How many bullets can I send through bricks of Lego? He's getting older and he's married. He's got kids. I know at one point, because he used to kind of rope in his wife, like on his, because he had multiple YouTube channels. He's got his gun stuff. I think he was a veterinarian, and then he had some kind of alternative channel that was like not veterinarian kind of setup, like still dealt with animals. But they got to be so popular that I believe they've had some stalking issues. And they're not really saying what happened, but just 18 months or 2 years ago, a couple years ago, they admitted his wife is no longer going to be on any of his videos. His kids are no longer going to be on any of his videos. And she'd even had some little businesses too.
Yeah.
I'm not craft businesses, but he's monetizing doing all these things. She's monetizing. It got to be to a point where there's a lot of these creepers. I don't know what exactly happened, but you get the feeling that somebody showed up and did something or threatened something, or maybe they had to put somebody in jail. And, I feel like that, if you look at the long story arc of Demolition Ranch guy, that's probably was really the beginning of the end. He's like, this isn't worth it anymore. And I think also because they monetize their videos, like from YouTube. Like, even if he stops making YouTube, he's still going to get checks from YouTube for years.
Yeah.
Get
the residuals.
Yeah, it's just going to keep, they're going to keep watching them. So, but yeah, I just, I guess it was just kind of interesting. This Watchtower Firearms, I never heard of them, but apparently they're stroking all this money to these people. I guess that didn't work. And I'm like, where's my money? Wait a minute. like some guy basically says, hey, I wrote a book. Can I be on your podcast? And it's like, no. Like, no one's ever been like, hey, can I write you a check to be on your podcast? Like, we've never had that offer. I guess we're not big enough. So, all right. We got to get to some real business here. You and I have been having some conversations. I've been looking to make an acquisition to the reference collection. I am ashamed to admit that I don't really know how a lot of this works, but what type of A2 rifle, AR-15 A2 rifle, should I add to the reference collection?
That's a deep rabbit hole you can go down. A lot of it depends on individual tastes. I mean, there's SP1 knockoffs if you're into the original, the very original style. There's all the modern A4 stuff with all the different cool kid shit you can put on them.
We've got the A4.
Yeah.
We have the FM Military Collector A4. We'll probably get the FM Military Collector M4. We've got an SP1. We got an A1. I1 and A2.
Yep, and we've talked about that. The hardest part is finding the A2 that's not an H bar.
Yeah, I hate the H bar.
Yeah, it's great if you're shooting competition or just shooting off a bench, but they're not real practical. They're just so heavy to carry around.
I had a Colt Sporter H bar type 20-inch rifle. It was in the 90s. I don't remember if you could take the carry handle. I'm thinking you couldn't take the carry handle off of it. And so, because I remember I was starting to pay more attention to modern ARs. And at one point I was considering, like, I couldn't collapse the stock on it and like make them shorter and more handy. It was front heavy, and I considered even cutting this is before there were flat tops. I would consider cutting the carry handle and putting optics mounts on top of the gun, because you used to cut these things before the flat tops came out, and I realized this is getting to be out of control. I just got rid of it because no matter what I did, I wasn't going to be able to get it to basically, I couldn't turn it into an easy to use carbine is what I basically realized that I was trying to do. And, so I got rid of it. But now that we kind of have the reference collection, if I had it to this day, I wouldn't need to buy an A2, but I feel like we should get an A2. And trying to find a Colt A2 that isn't an actual H bar is a huge pain in my ass. I did not realize they were basically, it seems like they're all H bars. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the sporter weight barrel is very hard to find. And when you do find one, because I think we found one here just the other day, but the price was just, shooting through the roof. The problem is everybody's selling them as pre-ban, because that would be the correct time frame for that particular profile of rifle. The problem is for the uninformed, and you can send all the hate emails to Marky. He'll filter them for me. But pre-ban doesn't mean shit. Once we hit September of 2004 and the AWB sunsetted, they were just a neutered rifle at that point, because there was no ban anymore. So everybody and their cat starts making ARs again, and so that pre-ban has no value.
I think it being a Colt has the value. And I'm not a big fan of Colt.
I'm not either. But a standard pre-ban H-bar is not $1,000 rifle. I don't care if it's got a rampaging pony on it or not. They're just not $1,000.
A pre-ban HR Colt seems to be going for well over $1,000.
Exactly, and that's my point, because it's pre-ban. You can turn around right now and you know, PSA makes one that's basically an A2 H bar that you can probably buy for, you know, $700. It's the same damn rifle, really.
See,
but people get wrapped around the axle on that whole pre-ban thing, thinking they're buying something. And yeah, it was worth $1,000, $1,500, whatever they brought, right up till September of 2004.
So okay, so that's kind of the debate we're having here, and I, you know, like, this is so out of control because I can't tell some of these guns apart from each other. I literally find listings for guns, and I send it to Kraken, and I go, what kind of AR is this? Because I can't, like, because you know all these, like, what, the 6,500 to 6,501,
6651,
60 and all that, and I'm like, I can't tell them apart from shit. I can't. I'm just like, you know, I can tell. I recognize furniture. I can recognize slab side fencing. I can recognize forward assist and teardrop, and I can recognize adjustable rear sights and carry handles and non-removable versus removable. But I like have a real hard time sometimes telling some of these barrels apart. You have to get and look at the markings. Like, there's a government profile versus an H-bar, and you know, some of them don't even say H-bar on the receiver, but it says H-bar on the barrel. And I'm just like, God, this is killing me. But here's my debate. It's like, okay, as a reference gun, you know, we have the A4, the FN Military Collector A4, because, you know, it's a well-made gun, and two, I mean, it's actually, they're a military contractor. Like, there's a lot of guys, there's a lot of Marines that spent their career running around Iraq with a 20-inch A4 M16. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if you're that guy, and I mean, that's a legit gun to buy. Well, you know, I was speaking because we were talking about Military Arms Channel. I had watched a video he had done comparing some of these Repop A2s. And I go back and forth because it's like, okay, Springfield's got an A2 out, and I can't remember, was maybe the upper and the lower didn't seem like they matched, and like maybe the hand guards weren't really correct and they moved. And then it was the PSA gun, or they call it the Harrington and Richardson gun made by PSA. I can't remember what the kick on that gun was. And like there was just seemed like none of these guns really seemed right. Mm-hmm. And you know, part of me is just like, well, fuck it, I'll just get a Colt. And because we're not going to shoot it that much. I mean, it's again, I have a thing like I call reference guns and working guns. And so you'll notice yesterday when we were shooting, you know, like even like my Blaser R8, we were shooting it. You'll notice, I mean, I try not to bang it into the ceiling, but I mean, I just throw that down onto a table.
It's a work gun.
Yeah, I mean, it's spray painted. But like if we're up there with the Swedish M41B sniper rifle, I'm trying not to tear up that wood stock. You know what I mean? Yep. And so, you know, these Colt, like this Colt A2 gun or this theoretical A2 gun, you know, I wouldn't be beating it up. I would shoot it, maybe do some drills with it, make some video with it. But, you know, we're not going to be banging it around or doing whatever. So
it's not going to bounce around the truck, be a truck gun.
It will never, correct. It will never be a truck gun. And so it's like, well, you know, maybe I'd be better served just getting a Colt because I don't have to worry about, because the argument for some people will make for the H&R gun is like, well, if you want a gun, if you want an A2 to run and gun, you can get the H&R and not worry about if you blow it up or you really tear it up. Whereas a Colt, let's say you shoot the barrel out, you got to get a new barrel. Would Colt even put a new barrel in that gun? You have to, it wouldn't be original, you know.
You'd have to buy an aftermarket barrel, and then it's not an original Colt.
So I go back and forth. And I guess the other thing that kind of is, which is kind of weird, you know, since I'm a 1911 guy, I don't like Colt.
No, I'm not a big Colt fan myself, with a few exceptions.
I think they're a company that's been living off the past for way too long, and, you know, that's why CZ had to come buy them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just, I think their 1911s, even until probably very recently, are just razor blade disasters, you know. We did buy the new release Colt Python. That's a really impressive gun. I like that gun. But
well,
the Colt,
I've got that King Cobra in there that I just got.
Yeah, you literally
we're going to do some content
picked it up on the way here. And so, you know, it's like for a working AR, I mean, I just get BCM. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to, like, I find all the Colt stuff kind of, not only do I not like some of the decisions they make or how they operate, but also that space. You get into this market where you get these people that are always whacking each other. You know, it's like, oh, it's, you know, a Colt 63 whatever versus this or whatever, and all this is correct, and this is a transition model. And it's just like, I just want to vomit. And I'm just like, give me a BCM and shut the fuck up. Mm-hmm. I don't give a fuck. And and so that's where I get, and then I have to start looking at these A2 guns, and I'm right back into, oh God, I can't tell them apart. You can't, it's like, is this one too expensive? Is this one not expensive? Why does this one look just like this one, but they're radically different in price? You know, and it's just like, I hate the entire market, you know, whereas, I mean, that's, you know, like a lot of these collectible guns as reference guns, just go buy one. You know, just think of a rare gun, or if you just want just go buy an FNC. Just go buy a Galil. Just go buy a Russian AK. Just go buy a Belgian FAL. And there's variants, but you know, you're not going to buy the wrong one. But the Colts, it's just like, poof, you know, because you get a bunch of dudes that buy shit and they don't shoot, and they're just whacking each other. And I hate that segment of the gun market. And so I get frustrated and I go back and forth.
When it comes to ARs and 1911s, for the longest time, my theory has been Colt is what you buy when you want something good but don't know what good is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You can break out that gold cup and think you really have something, when in reality there's, you know, an Ed Brown, a Wilson. In my opinion, even the SIG 1911s will just run circles around them.
Yeah, SIG pisses me off because, you know, they make a 1911, doesn't fit in a 1911 holster.
Right. Like, some they fit in some of them they don't. The problem is,
what's the point?
Is you literally got to take the gun in and go, nope, doesn't fit in this one.
You know.
Oh yeah, it'll fit in this one, but not real well.
I mean, just like.
Yeah. I carried a Scorpion a SIG Scorpion 1911 for a long time, and I finally found an ALS holster that it would fit decent in, and it was for the the Dan Wesson, I forget which model, one of their Hoochier 1911 Dan Wesson models.
Okay.
And it fit well, but then you could turn around and, you know, get a Safariland ALS holster with, you know, for a 5-inch government with rail, and it didn't fit worth a shit. It was, you literally had to take the gun in, and there was a uniform supply shop in Omaha, and I took my pistol in, and nope, well, maybe if I have to. Oh, here we go, yeah. But, you know, with Safariland, there's so many, it's kind of like Colt and their model numbers. You have to have a 30-page printout just for all their different holsters for just 1911s. And every one of them's just a little bit different, so it's not like a standardized 1911 holster.
So, getting back to the A2 thing, I just realized something. I was like, well, does BCM make an A2? And it's like, well, they have I'm looking at the website now, BCM standard 20-inch government profile, complete upper receiver. It doesn't have handguards. So I guess, well, that wouldn't be an A2 though. No, because that's a flat top. That would be like a A4. Mm-hmm. Do they do, like, I guess BCM doesn't do the repop, like, you know, and I haven't wanted to put I think I got 3 pages of this stuff. I wasn't prepared to scroll through for 3 pages. It's like, it doesn't look like that they're, yeah. So, you know, I get frustrated. I look at the repops and I look at the reviews, and it's like, the furniture is messed up. It you know, it doesn't feel right. It's like it's falling. It's like one of them, like, that's falling off the gun. And then the other side is, oh, you know, I can't, every Colt I can find H-bar is an H-bar, which I don't really want, but maybe I'm going to have to get one. And the entire market is polluted by super arrogant people that think they're shit special. And I get frustrated and it turns me off. And I'd gotten so frustrated, I had sent you and I was like, well, maybe I should just, if I'm going to have to get an H-bar, want to get one of them Colt Delta guns that comes with the scope and the cheek riser and whatever, because it's
rubber like, armored scope.
Yeah, and it's like, well, I mean, why not just get that? I mean, it's like, well, that's an A2, but it's, I mean, it
kind of makes sense if you resign yourself to having to get the H-bar. There was probably, you know, from a collector standpoint, there were fewer of those Deltas made than any of them. So if you can find one that has everything that came from Colt, you know, in the Delta package, for reference collection, that's probably the way to go, because at least that is genuine Colt. It's not a repop. It's going to be correct. It's an H-bar, which you don't like, but it's the correct configuration of the H-bar for the time frame.
Well, the idea of so it's like, okay, what would I do with an A2? I'd kind of do some run and gun videos with it. Maybe I'd put like a little 3-power scope on the carry handle, and then, like, you know, do some, just shoot it on the rifle range. Well, it's like, okay, well, if I have to get a Delta gun, a Colt H-bar Delta, not Delta Force, Delta gun, it's like, well, I just, instead of running and gunning with it, I just basically make it a bench gun, and then that's the maybe I just get that.
And that's kind of what it was designed to do. You know, it was more of a range gun, target type rifle versus a run and gun type of gun. But again, the configuration is period correct and purpose correct for what it is.
Well, here's my
argument. Which makes it fit in the reference category.
It does, but here's my argument against it. I've got the A1, so it's like an M16 A1. It's got the triangular handguard, A1 carry handle, whatever. It's lightweight, pencil barrel. It's cool. I've got the A4, which is government profile barrel, 20-inch barrel, flat top. You know, it's got the Knights rail out front. You can hang scopes and lights and lasers and rails on it. I mean, I could just put a scope on that. You know, I've got a Trigicon, military Trigicon 4-power on it now, which is correct. It's the scope that the Marine Corps had. You know, but I could put a whatever scope on. I could run and gun with it, or I could bench with it. But, you know, it would kind of be nice to have a more modern Svelte front handguard A2 that I could kind of do some run and gun with it, or put a 3-power scope on it, and do so I kind of want that middle gun, and that Colt Delta is not that. To me, from a functional standpoint and where it sits in the collection, it's much closer to an A4, you know, than an A2.
You're almost at the point where you either got to buy none of them, or you got to buy 2 of them.
Yeah,
I mean, in a perfect world, that's kind of where you're at. You almost need to just either completely wipe that off the map and move on to something else, and stop being gridlocked over which AR to get, or resign yourself to, I'm probably going to have to get an H-bar to get what I want in this world, and then I'm probably going to have to, spend the money and find an A2 Sport or Colt for this part of the world I want in the reference collection, and just wind up getting them both. Because from a reference standpoint, to me, they both have a historical place in a reference collection, but neither one does the job of both rifles completely.
Was the Colt Delta gun ever actually adopted by anybody, or is that just like some civilian fantasy gun? Do you know?
I can't say for certainty. I can do some research and get back to you on that.
Yeah, I don't. And it's just like, this actually goes back. I mean, this issue that I'm having right now, trying to figure out how to buy an A2 and buy one that would work in the collection, isn't like a new problem. My entire life, I have found AR-15s to be extremely frustrating, because the entire market segment is just so convoluted, and if you don't know stuff, it's almost paralyzing. Mm-hmm. And so, like, as an example, I mean, the first real, like, tactical rifle that I ever heavily shot, trained on, instructed on, mastered, and really did something with was a Scar 16. Because I was at a place, I was working, they did a lot of tac rifle stuff, and my boss one day was just like, here, take this gun, figure this the fuck out. And so I was like, it's just, okay, it's a Scar 16. And the only thing that ever had to be changed on it was the factory muzzle device. I was shooting with a bunch of people, and one of the staff came up to me. He's like, follow me. He goes to the back of his truck. He's like, unload your rifle. He puts it on. He's mad too. He's pissed off. And he gets out a wrench and he cranks off that muzzle device and he puts on a flash hider, because I guess the FN Scar comes at more of like a break. And I'm around all these other shooters, and they're just like getting blasted by this fucking thing. I didn't know. They handed me the fucking gun, and it was my gun. And like, that's part of like, I just, just hand me a gun and just, I don't want to have to, like, don't make this hard. And I find, a lot of, especially when you get into the Colts, the shit's hard. That's like the FN military collector, I like it. Buy A4, done. Buy M4, done. BCM, buy BCM, done. Mm-hmm. Colt, I don't know. You got to get this, or what about this, or what about that?
There's 4 submodels that all look the same if you don't know the little intricacies of what makes each one different.
And it's like, we've got all, you don't want that gun because you can't ever put an auto sear in it. Okay. Or you overpaid for that gun because you can't put an auto sear in it. It's like, I'm not going to put an auto sear in it anyway. I mean, I'd like to if I legally, but it's like, it's like everything is just give me the goddamn gun and shut up. And I felt like this in the 90s. I felt like this in the early 2000s when finally, where I worked, they basically here, take a Scar, because they were getting Scars from FN, and that's how I ended up with a Scar. Take the Scar and just go. We're and then now I'm back, and as soon as I get in the Colt, my eyes just want to roll back in my head. The entire thing is just exhausting. Probably like this podcast right now. Let's quit talking about the fucking A2. It's like, so, all right. So, anyway, I guess we should do it. We should get into it. The great political question of our day. Donald Trump has got everybody in a tizzy. He's made national, international news. He's issuing orders from the White House, and he's calling for Pete Rose to be let into the Hall of Fame. Gotcha. Did Trump actually issue a pardon for Pete Rose? Was Pete Rose was it tax evasion? What did he get jammed up on? I don't remember.
I don't remember what, he got jammed up baseball-wise on the betting, but I don't know what his criminal charges were, but if they were state or federal or...
You know what it might... I think it was tax evasion because he wasn't declaring his earnings. Pete Rose did bet on, and Pete Rose bet on baseball. I knew he bet on baseball. I knew his bookie. I've said this all before. Do I think he needs to be in the Hall of Fame? No. If Donald Trump thinks he needs to be in the Hall of Fame, that's fine. It's not like he's not in the Hall of Fame. His records are in the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose not being in the Hall of Fame guarantees he will be more famous than he ever would be as just a Hall of Famer, because everybody knows who Shoeless Joe Jackson was. And Shoeless Joe Jackson isn't in the Hall of Fame, and he was an incredible baseball player because he bet on baseball. And so that's fine if you want to let him in. I don't think he should be let in, but, Donald Trump's president, and he's the cult of personality. Who am I to go against,
Make Pete Rose great again.
Yeah, it's weird because I live in Cincinnati, and the great Con from Nebraska doesn't, and he's all for Pete Rose getting in, Charlie Hustle getting into the Hall of Fame, and I'm like, okay,
and I've said it before, the football Hall of Fame, the baseball Hall of Fame, it should be strictly based on on-field achievements.
I understand.
If you start looking at personal lives, there are a whole shitload of big-name baseball players in the Hall of Fame that by rights shouldn't be in there either. You start looking at players like Ty Cobb, and you start looking at their personal lives and their personal beliefs, and
Darryl Strawberry,
and you try and make a
Cocaine Darryl.
Well, and the steroid boys and all of that. You start looking at
juice
at personal lives as criteria for getting into the Baseball Hall of Fame, then to me you got to go through and you got to start weeding out a whole lot of people, especially in the early days of baseball. So to me, it should be based on your baseball statistics, your input to the game itself, your value to the game itself. What you did off the field, people can decide if you were a shithead or a decent person. That shouldn't matter about the Hall of Fame. It should be strictly about baseball.
Okay. You will find that I agree with everything that you said.
Except for Pete Rose.
No. You actually have not addressed Pete Rose at all. Pete Rose has not been banned. Pete Rose was banned from the Hall of Fame, not for his personal life, not for what he did off the field, not for his character off the field, or anything that had to do with him, or you can judge him as a person. Pete Rose was banned from baseball because he was actively betting on baseball games, betting on the outcome of baseball games as a player, then was betting on the outcome of baseball games as a coach. And the problem was in 1919, in the White Sox scandal of the World Series, the White Sox threw the World Series because organized crime bookies had either paid off or threatened members of the White Sox baseball team. And when it came out that you couldn't trust the outcome of a game because it might be corrupt, it almost destroyed the entire game of baseball. They had to bring in an outsider who was not associated with baseball, named Judge Landis, to be the commissioner of baseball, and he was a highly regarded person, and he came in and he cleaned house. And he banned all these people, and he changed a lot of the rules, and baseball there's literally a sign in every dugout, in every major league league team and minor league team, and it's in the dugout, and the sign says you under no circumstances are you to bet on baseball. This is a cardinal rule. It's not like some abstract rule that I didn't know I couldn't bet on baseball. Every time you walk out of the dugout, there's a sign. And that is why Shoeless Joe Jackson and all those White Sox were banned, because if baseball hadn't done that, baseball would have turned into boxing. And everybody knows boxing is corrupt and full of shit.
And so are lots of other sports when you get right down to it.
But
you get into college basketball and point shaving.
The whole argument on Pete Rose and baseball and the magic of baseball is the idea of stats and records and being able to compare people from 1925 to 2025, and the purity and the connected history of it all, that you can trust that people did the best they could and they weren't trying to affect an outcome so someone could beat the spread and make a bunch of money. And that is why Pete Rose was banned from baseball. And here's the thing, Pete Rose for what, 15 years, 20 years, denied. Pete Rose had, and here's the other thing, Pete Rose had made a deal with Bart Giamatti. They had his ass cold. I knew his bookie. Bart Giamatti knew his bookie. They had the stubs. If you want to read I can't remember the name of the report. I read it. They had Pete Rose guilty. They brought him in. They said, look, we know you did this. We have irrefutable evidence. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make you a deal. We're going to ban you from baseball and we're going to keep you out for a year. Or maybe it was 2 years, but I think it was a year. And then we will agree, because you're like the greatest player basically ever at this point, and we will re-bring you back in. And Pete, because we got to get out of this. This is a fucking mess, and we can't have the greatest fucking player fucking go down for this. And Pete Rose said, okay, I agree to this deal. They walked out to the press pool to start talking to the media, and Pete Rose walked right up to the microphone and said, I never bet on baseball. This isn't real. Like this conversation they just had behind the door never happened, because Pete Rose was crazy, was fucking crazy. And then he spent the next 15 years, 20 years lying about it. We all of us that knew, baseball knew. And then Pete Rose, he was denying it. And then he started doing dickhead shit. He had a radio program. And then like every year, for a couple years, when they would have the inductee ceremony for the people that are into the Baseball Hall of Fame, they're going to have the ceremony and they're all standing there, with the little jackets or whatever at the dais. Pete Rose would choose that day to do his radio program live from a sports book at a casino in Vegas. And this was when he was still claiming he never bet on baseball. And he did this for years. First it was, I never bet on baseball. And then eventually he got to the point where he's like, well, I never bet on a baseball game that I was involved in. And then it was, I never bet on a baseball game that I managed. And then it was, I never bet against the Reds. But what folks like Pete don't want to understand, and people that don't want to understand how some of this works, if you are able to watch Nancy Pelosi make stock purchases on the internet, a bookie is able to look and be like, hey, we got to get a spread or a number for the betting on this game, which isn't even technically legal. And they could be like, hey, did Pete bet on his team? No, he didn't bet on his team on this one. All right, that affects that. Even from an inside perspective, that affects the money, and that affects the betting on it. And then you could even get to a point where you could get bookies manipulating Pete to place bets or to not place bets, or Pete is now in debt, or they could even bribe him, hey, you're going to have to do this or not do this, or be a part of certain things or not be a part of certain things, or we're going to tell baseball that you're involved in all this. It was a mess. Mm-hmm. It was a bloody mess. And I understand Donald Trump likes to swan dive into stuff he doesn't understand, and that's fine. Pete Rose is dead. I don't wish any ill on Pete Rose. If there was ever a chance that Pete Rose was going to end up in the Hall of Fame, it was going to be after he died. I accepted that when Pete Rose was alive. I think on principle, I think Pete Rose lives on forever if he's kept out of baseball for the rest of his life. However, I'm not the president, and I'm not the I'm not the commissioner of Major League Baseball. So I wish Pete Rose the best. I think he'll get in. Do you think he'll get in?
I think he will eventually. They just have to on merit.
I think
there's just too many people in the Hall of Fame that are just, as humans, were total pieces of shit. And as people learn more about history, because we have that little magic thing that you've got on your lap right now, and we learn more about what some of the greats in various sports actually were like people-wise, and those stories get out. It becomes, it's almost like the Trump pardons of the January 6th protesters. It becomes really hard for the Democrats to say anything after Biden gave everybody in the world a pardon. It makes it real hard for them to not look hypocritical. Well, as people learn more about prominent sports figures and what they're like and what they were like off the field, off the court, it becomes really hard not to notice the hypocrisy of it. And I think that is probably what will push. Somebody will make a valid argument of the what about game and make it soundly enough that he'll squeak in, maybe with an asterisk by his name.
Well, he's in now. All of his stats are in with an asterisk by his name. He's in. Like this idea, like the 4,192 was, or 4,193, whatever it was, is 92 the number? Like that number, it's not like that didn't happen.
But the number is not the Hall of Fame jacket. It's not the plaque on the wall at Cooperstown.
The number is not the Hall of Fame jacket. It's not the plaque on the wall. I think
it's kind of like winning the Daytona 500, because the guy that actually crossed the line first got caught cheating and his car was illegal. He got all the celebration. He got the big trophy. He got all the pictures and the fanfare. And then 3 days later, NASCAR takes the win away because, his car didn't pass the droop rule. So the guy that finished in second goes in the record book as the 2025 Daytona 500 winner. But nobody will ever really realize it because all the video footage is of the cheater.
Yeah, I don't think that quite works, but I think it's a good argument. I think it's a good point.
It gets in the general area of how I think he'll get in.
I think what really kept Pete Rose out of the story I just told about Pete Rose and all that drama that happened. By the way, for the record, over there on that shelf is a baseball signed by Pete Rose that said, "I'm sorry I bet on baseball." I saw that. I was in Indianapolis in one of those stores, and I snatched that sumbitch up. I was like, because I paid $75 for it, and I knew it was going to go to Pete, but it was like, how often do I get a chance to buy a piece of somebody's soul for $75? And I bought that because I knew all these years, I knew what was going on with Pete.
And he'd have probably been better off if he'd have just came out, yeah, fuck, they caught me.
Yeah, well, he had a deal with Bart Giamatti, but here's the part of the story that I didn't even mention. That double cross, and that's exactly what happened. Major League Baseball tried to work with Pete. They tried to work out a deal with him. Bart Giamatti, they were talking face to face. It was very stressful. Pete double crossed Bart. And within 2 months, Bart Giamatti dropped dead. They attributed the stress of this whole situation. It killed Bart Giamatti. He died shortly thereafter. And I know the next commissioner, they were internally, they were pissed. It wasn't like their feelings about Pete Rose were not only the breaking of the rule and all of it, it was the double cross. and they killed Bart, and they were pissed at him. I mean, it was personal. It was like, you son of a bitch. And so as time goes on and you get more and more commissioners away from Bart Giamatti, and then guys like Trump coming in that want to defend old Pete, he's probably going to get in. So that's okay.
But to me, that kind of gets back to slights and grievances.
Yeah.
If you have a grievance with somebody, you can work it out.
Yeah,
This to me falls into the slight category, because if somebody feels slighted, there's a very good chance there is not anything in the world you can ever do to make that right, because a slight is taken personal. A grievance, there's facts, there's details. If you want to, you can work to a solution. When Pete Rose double-crossed MLB, that went from grievance because they had worked out the grievance on the betting. But when he double-crossed them, that went to slight. Baseball felt slighted, and when you slight somebody, that motherfucker will short dick every pygmy on the Congo to get back at you for the rest of your fucking life.
Short dick every pygmy on the Congo? Damn, I gotta write that one down, Ross Perot.
Need a crayon?
Yeah. Look.
Hey, like I've told you before, there's a reason I work night shifts, because I am not the guy you wanted running around on day shift when all the admin people were there.
Oh yeah. The command staff don't want to meet you. Yeah, you know what? Because we're gonna get off this. I'm gonna say this. In this Lent, and we're now in Lent. Lord, grant me the grace to see my own sins. Grant me the grace to see the sins in myself and not the sins in others. So I'm just going to let Pete go.
Till next time.
Donald Trump coming out at this point, I'm like, all right. I mean, to me, Donald Trump, then we really got to get off this. Donald Trump talking about putting Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame, for me, in Major League Baseball, is like bringing peace to the Middle East. I'm like, all right, okay. All right, Donald Trump, like, you could go in the Hall of Fame now. Shit, it's fine. So I'm over it.
Pete Rose is always a fun conversation.
Yeah, so it gets... Yeah. Well, this came up with Paul. Paul was for...
No, Paul was kind of middle of the road, is the feeling I got. Was kind of like, fuck that dude, but yeah, he might deserve to be in on records.
I feel like Paul was playing politics, because he could tell you and I were on opposite sides of it, and he didn't want to be on the losing side of that. So, and considering I hadn't paid him yet for that barrel, so I think that's what that was. So, let's talk about some of the stuff going on in the world. We'll talk about the State of the Union. But I'm going to just bring up a couple points that I thought were interesting that'll kind of fit into some of this stuff with Trump. So, talking about the issues with the issues with Zelensky and Ukraine. And Zelensky being in the freaking Oval Office and calling J.D. Vance a fucking bitch under his breath. Donald Trump didn't hear that or didn't know that was happening, because if Donald Trump had actually heard him say, you fucking bitch, or whatever he called him, Donald Trump would have gone...
Oh, he'd have thrown his ass out right there.
Donald Trump may have physically grabbed him and threw him out.
Walked him right out.
Like, you can't get cross with Trump. But, I want to make some points in Trump's defense on Ukraine, and I think it's only fair that I specify kind of like my position on Ukraine, so people don't think I'm like fair weather here. I've generally supported our involvement in Ukraine right now. Watch your microphone. Our involvement in Ukraine right now. Tucker Carlson and I really don't agree on that. I don't support putting U.S. troops in Ukraine, and I don't support NATO officially going in. But, I think, even some of the stuff the Biden administration did early-ish on in Ukraine, I thought was pretty impressive. It wasn't all terrible from Biden. Biden was pretty terrible. So I'm going to say that. So I'm not like someone like Tucker Carlson. It's always been like, end this war, get out. But let's just make a couple points here. The war is coming to an end. you'll notice in Western media, like, do you remember when there was a big like, hey, we're going to send Abrams tanks to Ukraine, right? Mm-hmm. Like, oh, wait till the Abrams get over there. And like, that was like, oh, this is going to escalate. Everyone was freaking out. And so we sent 30 Abrams tanks over there. You don't really hear about them Abrams tanks anymore.
Nope.
Do you know why? Out of the 30 Abrams tanks, how many of them have been destroyed?
Probably all of them.
19 out of 31. They were destroyed by drones, mm-hmm. and the Ukrainians had to pull them back. There's talk about the Ukrainians having the F-16s. Like, oh, wait till they come in with their F-16s. Don't really hear that anymore either, do you? There was an F-16 that was shot down. They think it may have been shot down by a Patriot. So like I guess it technically would be a blue on blue because they're
friendly fire.
Yeah, but a blue on blue because Ukraine is, their colors. So, the reality is a lot of this stuff isn't really, working out the way a lot of people thought with the given the Ukrainian stuff. The one thing the Ukrainians have really been impressed by and have had a lot of success with are I call it the MLRS. A multiple launch rocket system, but it's the new, what do they call it? That
HIMARS system?
The HIMARS, yeah, they call it HIMARS now. Like, they really like that HIMARS. It's been very effective. And in many ways, the Ukrainians were saying, why do we need tanks when we have HIMARS? But there's less ammo for the HIMARS. But even then, you'll notice there's things the Ukrainians haven't done with the HIMARS that you would have thought they would have done, but they were probably told not to. Like, knock out that bridge on the Kerch, over the Kerch Strait, that bridge that goes over the Sea of Azov, to Crimea. I mean, I almost wonder if maybe the Russians privately told the United States, if you knock that bridge out, we're going to set off a nuclear weapon. And that hasn't been told yet. I'm not getting information thinking that that's happened, but I find it very strange.
It's a pretty logical assumption.
Yeah, like something's going on there with that one. And like,
that's too juicy of a target not to at least have been tried to get hit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because you remember, they were talking about like how, how weak the Crimea was becoming, like how vulnerable Crimea was becoming. All of a sudden, you don't really hear about that anymore.
Well, I even also started saying, tactical nukes aren't off the table.
Yeah, they've said that the whole time.
Yeah. Well, people, worry that, is Putin crazy enough to do that?
Well, this is where I have to give Biden some credit. So early on in the war, we started. This is an example, and I've talked about this in the past, where Biden has done certain things where if Trump had done it, the media would have had the exact opposite reaction. Yep. So very early in the war, the Biden administration would come out and they would say, we know exactly where Putin is at all times. Or there would be a conversation with the leaders in Russia with Putin, and then like the text or what was discussed would be released by the U.S. because it was showing the Russians that we know more than what you think we know, and you're not keeping any secrets. And then there was the Biden administration had come out and said, we now know that the Russians are planning a false flag murder in western Ukraine to justify using a nuclear weapon in retaliation, or a chemical weapon in retaliation against Ukraine, and we're aware of it, and we know where Putin is at all times. Well, they were blowing their intelligence vectors of where they're getting at, and it was very effective. We were constantly within the Russians' decision-making circle. If Donald Trump had done the same thing, the media, who is for the war in Ukraine, would have said Donald Trump's a traitor, he's blowing all of these assets, burning all this intelligence, burning possible agents, people are dying. But it's just an example of the difference between, how the media treated Biden versus how the media treats Trump. So one of the problems, and the media is now, they're always saying that, Trump is like a puppet of Putin, and why does Trump want to side again with like somehow Trump likes Putin, or Trump wants to side with Putin, or Trump wants to do whatever with Putin. Well, the problem is the media doesn't want to give Trump credit. Putin has a problem. Putin has the same problem in Ukraine that we had in Afghanistan and that we had in Vietnam. Trump doesn't want to get into a position where he's embarrassing the Russians. The Russians have obviously not won this fucking thing. They've lost 1 million people. Between deaths, either they've lost between, KIA, so, killed, wounded, or MIA, there is 1 million Russian soldiers gone. They're not on the battlefield. They're no longer combat effective. They've lost 1 million losses. They've had at least 1 million military-age men also leave the country. So Russia has, they've lost all these tanks, all these assets. They've lost, 2 of 5 of their AWACS aircraft, which are impossible to replace for them. They've, like all this, they've lost the Black Sea fleet is fucking just basically destroyed. They've had to evacuate. I mean, you could easily see where the West could basically say, we won, you lost. And, maybe the Russians don't want to say that, but it's obvious that Trump is trying to not embarrass Putin so Putin can say, he can declare victory and go home. And the media today is trying to say Trump is trying to suck Putin's dick, whereas if it was Biden doing the same thing, he'd be a statesman.
Yep. He's trying to leave him an out.
Yeah, he's trying to give him an off-ramp off this. And that's why he's getting into this big fight with Zelensky. Also, this mineral deal that everybody's bitching about with the Trump wants, and Zelensky was wanting to sign it or not sign it. The Russians have communicated specifically that there will not be peace if Ukraine is part of NATO, and there will not be peace if there was a security guarantee for Ukraine. There's like that. They're like, that's a deal breaker. So this mineral deal is a hustle by Donald Trump. One, he could we can get some money and pay off some of this debt. But two, we have business interests in there. We're going to have troops in there. All of a sudden it's like, we don't have a security deal. We're in there because it's our minerals and it's our mine and our this and our that, and it's a hustle. And Zelensky keeps stepping over his own dick on this because Zelensky's like, I want a written guarantee that we get a security agreement, which I can understand. The Brits and the U.S. gave Ukraine a security agreement in the 90s to get them to give up their nuclear weapons, and obviously we didn't come in when they invaded here in 2022. So that's kind of where we're at with Zelensky and Ukraine and Trump. So I just wanted to get that off my chest because I see it all the shit in the media, and I'm like, everyone's lying about all this. They're lying about Putin. They're lying about Zelensky. They're lying about Putin. They're lying about Trump. And what's also interesting, I guess we have to admit, there's been multiple reports when Biden was president that Zelensky and Biden would get in screaming matches. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, no one's talking about that. And there was a report a week before the meltdown in the Oval Office with Zelensky that Zelensky had met with, was it the Treasury Secretary over there in Ukraine, and they had gotten into a screaming match, and everyone was denying.
After he blew him off for 2 hours because he slept in and was late for the meeting.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, he iced the Treasury Secretary.
So what's becoming more and more clear? Zelensky's a fucking psychopath. There's a problem here with Zelensky.
Oh, if you look at Zelensky's history, if people looked at the history of what he's done since taking over, and you just changed, you just left the name blank and said, this leader of this country has done this and this and this and this and this, you would go, well, that's either Donald Trump or Putin. No, it's Zelensky. He's outlawed Orthodox churches. He is
outlawed Russian Orthodox.
He's outlawed Russian languages. He has suspended elections in the name of martial law. Yeah. So he's basically declared himself a dictator. There is millions, if not billions of dollars of aid that's unaccounted for.
See, is that proven?
Yeah. There's stuff that we've given them that showed up on the black market. So, whether that's Zelensky doing that or just some enterprising staff sergeant in the Ukrainian army, who knows? But the other thing with the mineral rights deal is it's about an 80-20 split, American aid versus European aid. They're in Europe's backyard. Europe, all their aid is structured as loans. Now, whether they'll actually ever get repaid, who knows? But it's structured as loans they could call due. Ours was basically grants. Here you go. We're fighting communism. We're fighting Russia in a proxy war. Here's $350 billion. We don't get any of that back. So the mineral deal is also an economic way to get back at least some of what we have given them in aid. And it's a de facto security agreement, because if XYZ American company is mining lithium in Ukraine and Putin, hurts American workers, jeopardizes our American business interests, militarily, it's well known Trump will respond. There's your security agreement. We got skin in the game. We've got boots on the ground. They're civilian boots, but they're boots on the ground, and Putin's not going to fuck that up, at least under Trump.
Well, here's another thing that the media's lying about. Like they were complaining about Trump wanting to destroy NATO or wanting to pull us out of NATO, and then the war happened and all that, which is fine. But you'll notice, I know we've given Ukraine some dollars. Like, I was kind of surprised when I first heard this, and I was like, well, I guess it kind of makes sense. Like, we were paying all these civil servants in Ukraine to keep working. Like, it's not all the aid we give to Ukraine is 155 millimeter howitzers and shells and bombs.
No, we've basically been financing their government.
Yeah, which is kind of like, well, like you got to have paramedics, you got to keep hospitals running. So, I mean, I can kind of see some of that.
But that gets into humanitarian aid.
Well, okay.
Not keeping the clerks in the Ukrainian capital typing.
Well, here's my point. So, France has given a total of $8 billion. We've given like $200 billion worth of aid. And it's not all money, but there's all this stuff too. We've also initially, some of the stuff we were giving Ukraine militarily, a lot of these weapons, they do age out and you have to replace them. But we went beyond what's aged out, and some of it is like we have to replenish current stocks, and we can't really do that right now. We've run some of our stuff kind of low. But what's interesting is, if NATO, when I say NATO, I'm talking about all the members of NATO in Europe outside of the United States, if they actually had functioning large militaries, they would have plenty of military aid to give to Ukraine. They would have plenty of ability if they wanted to put troops in Ukraine. They would have plenty. They could give them bombs and guns and rockets, but they don't have it. I haven't looked up the numbers recently, but the two largest outside of the United States, probably the two largest militaries in NATO right now?
Per capita or just overall numbers?
Just overall, at least I'm going to say capability, because there could be a.
Well, I would say probably capability-wise would probably be the UK and French.
The UK's military is smaller than.
But they swing a pretty big stick.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
It's terrible. It's terrible. The UK's military is smaller now than I think before the Battle of Waterloo.
Really? Okay.
like it might be a quarter or something. It's terrible. The biggest two functioning militaries in Europe right now are France and Turkey. Turkey is a fairly large army. Now, this number could change because someone's going to listen to this and they're going to start screaming. So the real big player, like the people that have been spending money to increase their defense and their military spending, is Poland. Poland is... It's really interesting looking at Poland because Poland has been, they've been run over by the Russians and run over by the Nazis, and then the Iron Curtain fell, and so they finally, all that. And so Poland has basically been like, we ain't never letting this shit happen again. Mm-hmm. Poland has been buying, so they've been buying M1 Abrams tanks. They're negotiating possibly building M1 Abrams tanks. They have bought a bunch of, I think it's the Leopard 2 tanks. They operate the Leopard 2 from Germany, the German tanks, because the Germans don't fucking buy tanks. They make them, they don't have any, which is weird. I'll get to that in a minute. They've also negotiated, the Poles have just bought there's a tank that South Korea makes. It's called the K2. That's considered one of the best tanks in the world. If you really look at like people that are like tank nerds that are into the tank thing, they will say that the French Leclerc tank is like probably the best tank in the world, and now like maybe the K2 South Korean tank is probably right up there with it. Well, the Poles have bought, I don't know what they buy, 40 or 100, or maybe they're committed to do 400 K2 tanks, and they're negotiating with a license to build K2 tanks. They've also bought, I don't know, was it 90? Like 155 millimeter self-propelled howitzers from South Korea. Like the Poles are spending the Poles are like really, really seriously upping their military because they see all the world around them's going crazy, and they want to be part of NATO. Which is why you saw all these Polish AK rifles come to the U.S. because they wanted to switch to 5.56 and stuff. NATO, yeah, NATO stuff.
The Poles are actually part of the Ukrainian problem because in '94, when the USSR dissolved, one of the agreements was NATO would not expand into former Warsaw Pact countries.
Okay, yes.
So, while not the entire cause, you can point at Putin and say he's broke deals, but, some of them fingers point back also on some various things.
So this is kind of like where like people like Tucker. I like Tucker.
It's not as simple as Putin's a bad guy and invading.
Oh no, I can address it specifically because, but you'll get like guys like Tucker Carlson and some of his friends. And I like Tucker Carlson, but I don't agree with everything he says. But he harps on this NATO thing a lot, where it's like NATO is not supposed to go any farther east. And and people will try to portray it as NATO is kind of like this menacing monster that's like the Borg in Star Trek that's creeping farther and farther east, which is a cool story for Tucker Carlson at 9 o'clock, on Fox News. But that's not how this works. Mm-mm. Finland is now part of NATO. Finland ran to NATO, and Finland's never wanted to be a part of NATO. Finland ran to NATO like their hair was on fire because they have a big-ass border with Russia, and they're like, holy shit. The Russians are going back into Ukraine. But here's what people are not remembering. The Russians, just since 1991, they fought 2 wars in Chechnya. They've invaded Georgia twice and grabbed land. They grabbed South Ossetia and Abkhazia, which Abkhazia is on the Black Sea. Mm-hmm. And they did the Little Green Men thing in Crimea, grabbed that. They did the Little Green Men and then invasion, the Little Green Men in eastern Ukraine, and then they did the full-on invasion in Ukraine. They're doing the same thing in Moldova, which is a little separatist little fucking area southwest of Ukraine that they're trying to turn into a little Russian enclave, which is causing all kinds of problems. And in our lifetime, it is very probable that at some point when, is it Lushenko? Who's the leader of Belarus? So that is it Lushenko, that guy? Is that his name?
I think so, yeah.
When he dies or he gets crossed with Putin, eventually they're just going to all of a sudden, Belarus will become part of sovereign Russia.
Yeah.
And, everyone sees the Russians coming. The Russians are doing this. They've been doing this kind of stuff. Anyone that's had a small country next to the Russian Empire, whether it was the Russian Empire or the communist or now the Putin's Russia, they realize they're coming. So this argument that like NATO is like this evil force that is like slowly gobbling up all these countries, it's like a lot of these countries, Georgia has been screaming for NATO membership for at least 15 years. And no one gives it any real mind, because the reality is the way NATO works right now, we're going to have a really hard time defending the Baltics. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Like, it's just getting up there, going through the Suwalki Gap or coming up through, the North Sea. It would be a hell of a fight, and that would be difficult. Trying to get NATO to go from Poland and Romania across the Black Sea to get to Georgia to defend it from Russia coming across, that's just not going to happen. I mean, this idea that the Tucker Carlson people they're so anti-NATO, and there's a lot to be anti-NATO about, because I can get onto that in a minute too. But it's like all these countries are running to NATO because they're scared shitless and they know they can't stand up to Russia. It's not NATO trying to, take over the world. It's, these small countries realizing it's not, the war in Ukraine isn't the only thing that's been going on over there. Mm-hmm. A lot of people that say the Russians are on the march, Tucker Carlson doesn't want to admit it, but it's true.
Oh yeah, but on the and then to kind of add to that too, you have to look at it from NATO members' point of view, and say, is that really a fight we want to throw our bulldog into? Because if we let them in, we're obligated, and is that even a winnable fight? Just for some of the reasons you brought up. So at some point, you've got to say, we just don't need to throw our bulldog in there, and Maybe 20 years ago, if you'd have come to us, but you can't come when the bad guys at the back door try and call 911 and expect us to come save your bacon at the very last second.
Well,
no skin in the game.
We've been talking about all the shit that's going on with NATO and expanding, but we also have to talk about the other point of NATO, because people in the West and on these news channels talk about NATO like NATO's great. Like, we have to be part of NATO. Why? NATO keeps the peace. NATO does this. NATO does that. Part of the rule with NATO is you have to spend 2% of your GDP every year on defense. You're not just in NATO, you have to meet certain conditions.
And a lot of them haven't been.
Not only have a lot of them haven't been, not even the Brits. Now, here's what happened. Like, starting last year, or maybe the year before, like Germany and some of these countries have come out. But Donald Trump in his first term went over to Europe, and he's like, why do we have NATO? Why are we doing this? You're ripping us off. You're not spending the money that you need to be a part of NATO, but we have to have all these forces over here and all this shit. And then he got really pissed off when the Germans were spending all this money to support NATO, to defend Europe from Russia, and then Germany turns around and signs a gas pipeline with fucking Russia.
Yep.
And that means the Russians can turn it off. And it's like Donald Trump was right 5, 6, 7 years ago, and the media laughed and laughed and laughed. And like now that all this shit's happening with Russia and Ukraine, they don't want to talk about that. Donald Trump's trying to destroy NATO. Donald Trump's trying to save NATO.
They can't eat that crow.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. So now if you look at the numbers that a lot of these NATO countries that are, like we've committed to increase our GDP for spending, like for 2025. Like if you look at the numbers now, like I'm sure if like CNN were to be like, no, Marky's wrong. Here's the numbers from, this country's over 2%, this country's over 2%, this country's over 2%. Cool story, bro. How long does it take to build and buy a fighter aircraft? You don't go to the store and get it off the shelf. It takes I don't know, months and years to buy a complement of aircraft. It takes years to build a warship. It takes years to build a submarine. It takes years to buy tanks and turn it into a functional armored battalion. All these numbers are on paper. Most of these countries could double their defense spending for the next 10 years, and it wouldn't make up for what they needed to have spent for the last 20. It wouldn't meet what we do. And the reason NATO has done this is where Donald Trump is right, is all of these countries in Europe, they're all these socialistic countries, and they run all these social welfare programs. And also, this is the little dirty secret too, a lot of these militaries really aren't militaries. They're make-work programs so people can have a job. Yep. And so these governments, they don't want to spend the money on defense because they want to spend the money on green initiatives, and they want to spend the money on,
social programs,
painting deers pink. Yeah. And so, like when J.D. Vance went over there and basically was telling Europeans, the party's over, and y'all aren't really standing up for the true Western liberal democracy values, and the one dude started crying. It's because they know they're going to have to cut spending on all this bullshit and start spending money on defense.
You start taking social program money away from people, and the people start bitching, and that's how you wind up not getting reelected.
The biggest economic power in Europe is Germany. Mm-hmm. They've dominated Europe for a long time, and they don't have a military. Like, people don't realize, like, we reported on this, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. Like, none of their, like, what was it, like, they could, at one point, they could only fly, like, 5 fighter aircraft because the rest of them were in repair. Like, I think all their submarines were broken down. The Germans don't even have a military right now. Like, they really don't. And it's like, okay, like, I mean, Donald Trump's right. And if Donald Trump had gotten NATO to start spending the money it needed to spend in his first term, the Europeans today could tell Donald Trump, fuck you, we're going to keep supporting Ukraine, we're going to go it alone. Nobody wants to talk about that.
Yep.
Ugh. Are we going too long?
and now you got Zelensky calling JD a fucking bitch or whatever he said. What was it he said?
Fucking bitch. Fucking bitch.
Fucking bitch. And the Ukrainian ambassador to she's doing the face palm plant thing. Like, oh shit.
Oh dude, she wanted.
And then he doubled down on stupid with Brett Baer. 3 hours later.
I didn't even see that.
Literally, Brett Baer gave 3 chances, just yes or no. Do you owe the United States an apology? Well, basically, the United States does not understand our point of view because it is our people. Okay, I'm throwing you a rope, dickhead. Grab it.
Yeah.
And he just kept stepping on his dick with golf shoes on, and he just did it over and over and over. And as soon as Donald Trump says, you know what, I just don't think we're going to give you any aid because we're not convinced you want peace. So, fucking Europe, clean up your own backyard. You can pony up. Now all of a sudden, hey, we can do a mineral deal.
Hey, let's take a break for 1 second.
Yeah, because I got to piss.
And we're back. Old men have to go to the bathroom. We were just talking about it. By the way, Kraken just saw my... Pete Rose, I'm sorry I bet on baseball thing, and it's faded. And, you know, there's a debate as to whether it's faded because it was in my old office and got hit by the sun, or whether old slimy old Pete Rose used the disappearing ink on that baseball.
Got his money.
Got his money. I tell you what, it crossed my mind. I mean, I'm not trying to like harp on old Pete, but.
And I'm Pete's attorney here, and I even got there with that one.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, like you just kind of got to wonder, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility. So
I mean, not exactly a dumb move if he did.
So
we got to give it to him.
We've decided that this is going to be. We've had people say that they would like longer podcasts, and they're about to get it because we are 2 hours in, and since the Great Khan is in from Nebraska,
not C-O-N.
Yeah, not C-O-N. We're just going to keep going. So you were asking, it was like, we can just break this up into 2 podcasts. I'm like, nah, we're gonna get it all out because I'm behind on a pod anyway. And the reality is, they'll, you know, the way as fast as things are going with, you know, gun stuff around here, Donald Trump, you know, if I release a podcast in 2 parts, it'll age out so quick. It won't make any sense.
Oh, we're going from 24-hour news cycle to 1 and 2 hour news cycles.
Hey, look,
it seems like.
If all these dudes can do 3-hour podcasts, we can do 2-hour and 45-minute podcasts. I don't know.
Right?
We haven't even actually talked about the State of the Union.
There's 2 hours right there.
Yeah, I don't want to spend 2 hours on it. Hey, look, we talked about A2 rifles. We talked about Colt Delta H bars. You know, I heard, I have a confession. I did not watch the State of the Union. You were here. I mean, you were in Ohio. For the State of the Union. I guess you did watch it or listen to it.
Yeah, I stayed up and watched it live.
Yeah, I was working on shit here on the range. I heard it went over well. I heard people liked it. I heard it's got good reviews. I guess the Democrats did a bunch of goofy shit.
All kinds of goofy shit. Congressman Al Green got ejected from the chamber, probably 5 minutes into it, stood up shaking his cane, yelling at Trump, saying, "You don't belong here," and
yeah, he does.
They speaker gavelled, told him to read the official, the House will maintain order. He kept shaking his cane, yelling, "You don't belong here," and so they gavelled again and had the sergeant at arms remove him, and he kept on hollering, and old JD stood up behind and give him the thumb boot, get him out of here.
I heard that.
And they wound up, 4 or 5 of them escorted him out. And
Did they blink the lights and say, "You don't have to go home, but you got to get out of here"? It's 2:00, time to go home.
So that just started the whole shenanigans, and it was just from a Democratic point of view. For the looks for the Democrats, the optics, to me, it was a total shit show. And even CNN is saying it was a shit show. It was that bad. They lost the liberal media after that.
Really?
Yeah.
Shit, I hadn't heard. Again, because I don't watch the mainstream news. So, well, I mean, look, Al Green made a point. You don't belong here. In some ways, I do agree with the congressman, because before LBJ, the State of the Union used to be a speech that was, I think, given in private. It wasn't televised, and it was a lunch. The last president to do it that way was Eisenhower. Mm-hmm. And LBJ decided he wanted to make this big primetime production, and they've been doing it ever since. There's nothing in the Constitution that says it has to be done like this. As a matter of fact, originally, the State of the Union, I believe, was sent by letter. Mm-hmm. It was not even, it was just, the president is required under the Constitution to advise Congress at the State of the Union. Yeah. And I believe it was just written out as a letter.
Well, and technically this wasn't a State of the Union address. This was just a joint address to Congress that Trump requested permission to do.
No, this isn't. No. Well,
No, it's nicknamed the State of the Union, but this was not a State of the Union address. This was a joint speech to Congress.
yeah, but I think no. But the thing is, I think because he just became president, the first time they do it, like if he
Would be the first year after inauguration.
And so
this was just a joint speech.
I think this is the if it was a State of the Union, it's this day and this time. I believe. I have to go look up on this, but
Roughly the time frame, because it used to be in January, and then it got moved around a couple times because Pelosi wouldn't schedule it.
They used to swear in the new president, I think, in like March.
Yeah.
Like it used to be like they moved all, because it used to take people weeks to get around on horseback.
So, I mean, technically, for this speech, the Speaker of the House could have told Trump no, or just not scheduled it. That's why when Pelosi was dicking with Trump, because I think traditionally up until the first Trump presidency, it was, I believe, in January was the State of the Union address, and Pelosi kept saying, nope, don't have time, nope, don't have time, so they pushed it off to like March in like 2017 or 2018.
That kind of rings a bell.
So this was just a joint address to Congress.
Yeah. Oh, remember the girl?
But it was structured as the way of the actually the whole shit show started with when they walked the president in. Both sides of Congress traditionally send members to walk the president in, and the Dems said fuck you and didn't show up. So that just set the tone for the entire night right there.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting, like somebody made a point, like, isn't it interesting how all of a sudden the Democrats are concerned about the price of eggs? Like for the last, 4 years, it's like, like, what are we going to do about the price of eggs? Like, there's, it's...
Well, wait a minute, inflation's not real. We're imagining it.
Yeah, then it was, what was it, 1 year during Thanksgiving? What was it, John, whatever her name is, Corinne Jean Pierre... She came out that did she say like the average Thanksgiving dinner is now like 47 cents cheaper or 53 cents cheaper? Or
Joe, it's 47 cents cheaper.
It was like, come on.
And like the 4th of July barbecue was some ridiculous, like 18 cents cheaper for your standard hot dog barbecue.
When you're explaining, you're losing. So
yeah.
So it's interesting though, there's two things. I haven't seen it, but I've seen still pictures of it that, like Donald Trump, there's the Laken Riley family, the Dems didn't stand or clap. I guess there's, I don't know where the black kid with cancer came from, but they didn't want to stand for him or clap. And then there was another girl that was raped, you said?
Jocelyn Ungary, the 12-year-old girl who was raped for 2 hours and then murdered under a bridge by illegals. Trump, she was really big into animals. So Trump named a wildlife refuge in her name, and her family was there.
Okay.
The Democrats sat on their hands for that, scowled. There was a young man there, 6-letter athlete in high school, 4.46 grade point average, had applied to West Point.
I heard about
his dad was a police officer that had been slain in the line of duty.
Oh, I hadn't.
And so Trump announced that his application to West Point had been approved. Nothing but contempt from the Democratic side.
Can the president, I don't remember can a president nominate someone to go to the service academy? I guess they could.
Senators do, but I would assume as commander-in-chief, he could omnis.
Who's going to tell? Who's going to? People. A lot of people don't understand this. That the service academies are part of the military. So he could. I guess the president could be like, "You're going to college."
Well, and I would assume as commander-in-chief, he has that privilege to approve whoever he would want to go to a service academy.
Yeah, I mean,
I believe each senator can do 2 nominations each year.
Yeah, the total.
Is that the way it works?
I recall.
And then I assume there's probably some special circumstance appointments to the academy, certain athletes and what have you, and
Yeah, because they do recruit
different circumstances.
Yeah, I had a classmate of mine when I was in high school that was recruited to play football for Navy, and he was a good student too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was football.
So there's the 2 for each senator plus some add-ons in there.
If I recall, I don't know what it is it's probably similar, but basically each class, at least incoming class at West Point, was about 1,000 cadets. Mm-hmm. So you get 4,000 people there at any one time. Well, I mean, but it's never that many because they lose them. They lose. I mean, they lose a not insignificant number. Mm-hmm. And like the ones you hear about, like in their like 3rd year, it's like wow, like it just did like holy shit, like just feel like what's going on there? You did that for 3 years, like really? Now you're going to quit, or But sometimes they get kicked out for academics or honor code violations and all that kind of stuff.
I had a classmate that went to West Point, and he was like the class brain. Mm-hmm. And he had to take, and one of my sayings is he's doing calculus and he's head smart. This kid was pretty close to calculus and he's head smart. Mm-hmm. And I talked to him several years afterwards, and he told me that he actually had to take remedial math classes before, what is it, your plebe summer? The summer before your freshman, what would be your freshman year? He basically spent his plebe summer taking remedial math classes to be able to
like your first day's our day, but they end up having to go out. If I remember, it's been a while. They go out and they do like this field exercise. They go in the summer. What they call that? Beast barracks. That might be Beast. Does that sound right? Beast barracks. They go out to
something.
They go out to I did this quiz today. I would have studied. There's a camp. West Point is a giant reservation, and there is a Camp Buckner. It's Camp Buckner. Yeah, Simon Bolivar. It's named after Simon Bolivar Buckner, and they go out to Buckner, and it's a field exercise, and they're out there for a couple weeks, maybe 2 weeks, mm-hmm. and that's kind of like where they kind of gel, and then as they come in, they when they start their academic year.
And he not only had to do all that, but he also basically a college semester worth of I think 3 or 4 different remedial math classes.
Yeah.
And this was the kid in class that's like, if anybody in our school is ever going to be an astronaut, it'll be this kid.
They probably
and he's
do
like,
it.
I struggled.
They probably do that after they do I
mean, at some point in there before he started day 1 of his first year, mm-hmm. just to get there, he basically had to do a year's worth in a short amount of time of remedial math to make the cut.
When I was in high school, there was another kid who also went to Annapolis. Annapolis recruited us, I guess, real hard. Fun fact, no one knew who this was. When I was in college, I was recruited by the NSA. But I was like, no. I didn't want to talk to him. But and I was in high school. This kid, he was. I want to be careful because I don't want to out the kid. He was very, very, very smart. He was our class valedictorian, and he was a kid. He went, and I've said this before on a podcast years ago. He was invited to take a math test. It was an invitation-only math test. I think it was a national test, and out of I can't remember, it's either out of 12,000 students, he came in 16th, or out of 16,000 students, he came in 12th. Like, kid was brilliant. And what it was is, and we'll look back on it now, he went to Annapolis, and my understanding is, and I've heard it from multiple people, that he had a complete mental breakdown and was separated. And what it was, if looking on it, is he had been Mr. Perfect his whole life. He never got anything less than an A, and he never do. And the rumor we always heard was, when you're in your freshman year, I don't know what they call it in Annapolis, the Naval Academy, but they upperclassmen come in and it's like, make your bed. They tell you how to do things. And the story we heard was, upperclassmen come in, do a room inspection, bounce the quarter off the bed, and be like, this is fucked up. 5 demerits, make it again. And this kid was making, like, he was doing everything right. They were fucking with him. It was and he couldn't handle it. He had a complete meltdown.
Yeah, boot camp 101.
Yeah, but it was boot camp 101, and he had a complete, like, literally it wasn't a situation where, I mean, maybe they separated him, like he chose to leave, but I believe we were all told, the story we were all hearing was, it was involuntold to leave.
Yep.
Yeah. So
we have a listener whose stepson graduated from West Point, one of the smartest kids I've ever met. And, he had to hustle and work hard. It is not a cakewalk.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you are put under pressure. And, the thing that always struck me about, whether it's West Point or Canoe U,
you are a Navy guy, Canoe U.
You may have been the smartest. You may have been the valedictorian in your class of 1,000 at your high school, but once you get to West Point or Annapolis, everybody in your class at West Point was the smartest kid in their class.
Yeah.
So there's all that pressure too. You're used to everything being easy. You're used to being the top dog academically, and now all of a sudden everybody in the room is at that level. And their job at West Point and their job at Annapolis is to take the cream of the crop and turn them into something. So I can't imagine what the pressures and stresses would be.
Yeah, I used to have I can't go into it here. It's not like it's anything like really impressive, but I used to have a professional relationship with West Point. And, I'm not unfamiliar. I've had a lot of contact and dealings with West Point, with cadets and with staff and instructors at the campus. So I'm not unfamiliar with a lot of this stuff. But I've never heard Canoe U before. I think that's fucking hilarious. Canoe U. Speaking of Canoe U, how things can go wrong. I want to talk about a couple of Navy things. So, how like everyone's kind of worried about China and the war with Taiwan, if China's going to invade Taiwan, and the Navy's like, we have to start dealing with this. So the Navy's done a couple of things I thought was really interesting. So the Navy, I believe it's the Navy, but they've got a version of the Reaper drone. They call it I don't know if it's the Sea Reaper or they call it the Sea Drone or the Sea Reaper, but it's called the MQ-9B. So like the drones you see, in Afghanistan and all that. This drone has an anti-sub detection capability and an anti-sub kill capability. Guess what the range of this drone is?
Well, I would guess it would be similar to like the IRL Reapers. I mean, just
I don't think
incredible range.
I don't know what kind of range.
I'm sure it's classified, but I'm sure it's probably pretty staggering what their loiter time is.
I saw this number and I was like, this can't be right. This can't be right, because if this is right, this is like a game changer. This drone, unless it's a typo or it's misinformation, again, the Navy doesn't, the Navy doesn't, the Navy doesn't tell how deep their subs go. They always put out fake numbers. But they're saying that this MQ-9B Sea drone has a range of 5,753 miles. Now, I don't know how, is that refueling? I mean, are they refueling drones? Do they have drones refuel? I don't know, like 5,000 miles?
Well, I suppose there's environmental conditions that come into play, but, you know, like just like a surveillance Reaper, how long can it loiter?
I mean, isn't the MQ-9 the one that's propeller driven?
If I remember right, it's not only prop driven, but it actually uses an inline Ford engine.
Yeah, like it's,
yeah.
There's some that are jet propelled, but it's like they fly really, I don't know, maybe this thing goes, I don't know, if it can fly 5,000 miles, maybe it's flying at like 50,000 feet or some shit. Like, I'm like, okay, I guess. I thought that was interesting. So here's the other one I thought you would like. So the Navy, the Navy has, and this is kind of going into the Ukraine thing a little bit, the Navy has the SM-1 missile, the SM-2, and then there's like an SM-3, and I can't remember which ones. Like, is the SM-1 like an anti-aircraft missile? Maybe the SM-2, and there's like a SM Block 2, 2A.
You start getting into the different blocks, which are different generations and applications.
Some of them are anti-ballistic missiles.
Yep.
Some of them are anti-aircraft. Then there's an SM-6, and what pissed the Russians off is the Navy developed, because this system is so good, this Aegis system. We have the Aegis missile cruisers and the Aegis missile destroyers, and it's so good that they wanted to start deploying this on land. And so the only way they knew how to do it is they literally, instead of trying to reinvent an entire system, they just took the superstructure from an Aegis cruiser. It looks like a Ticonderoga class superstructure, and they called Aegis Ashore, and they built this. There was one in Poland, and there's one in Romania, and the Russians went fucking crazy because we put it in as supposedly a defensive system. Mm-hmm. But, you know, all you just have to do is tell the missile to hit whatever, and maybe it can be an offensive system. And the Russians, this thing's so close relative to Moscow that, like, the Russians were convinced that this is like a decapitation strike capability. But, you know, we're putting it in Europe. Again, Donald Trump's right. We're spending all this money in Europe. We put Aegis Ashore, 2 of them in Europe. And so, you know, so this is part of the issue. Like, Russia really does not want an Aegis Ashore showing up in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Like, that would really piss them off. Well, the Navy's not done. The Navy has the SM-6 missile. They've now modified it that it can be fired from an F-18. It can be carried. It's a giant fucking missile. And it can be carried and fired from an F-18 like a fucking, you know, Top Gun, like Fox 1. Psh. So I guess, I don't know, this is Fox 6. Psh. But, like, you know, like these, so now you've got Navy aircraft that can go to whatever their bingo range is, and then they can fire this missile, which can go really far. And it's like, oh boy.
And the fire control system is Aegis, which can reach
different aircraft and ships can.
So you can you know, triangulate fire control and I mean literally drop warheads on foreheads.
Yeah.
Literally.
So literally they're turning, I don't know how many of these missiles, I mean maybe it's 1, maybe 2. I would imagine it's 1. But, you know, you've now basically turned every, I know they've cleared it. They can hook them up to the F-18. I don't know if they've got them on the F-35 because it would really mess up their stealth profile. They'd have to fly dirty. But basically, they've turned every F-18 into a single-shot Aegis missile cruiser. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, fuck. Like, you know, and, you know, I'm really interested in the coming Pacific War. I've been waiting for it to come for a while, and I'm convinced that the future war in the Pacific, you know, we went to the age of the battleship, and then we've gone to the age of the carrier. But the argument the Navy's making is this now makes the carrier, it pushes the threats to the carrier battle group way much
bigger
farther
standoff
back.
range.
They're claiming it makes the carrier unbeatable now, which, okay, fine. But I'm convinced the next stage of naval warfare will be dominated by submarines. The submarine war is coming next, And so I pay attention to a lot of this stuff, and I just thought it was really interesting. You know, the Reaper that can hunt for subs over 5,000 miles. You know, the S6 you can hang off of F-18s. And here's the one that I always thought was really interesting. And nobody really talked about it. And they've not really admitted it, but it seems obvious to me. You know, remember when you were in the Navy, remember the P-3 Sub-Hunter aircraft?
The Orions.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine that flew those. Well, they've replaced those with basically their 707 jets. It's called the P-8. Well, those P-8s can carry all of these, like these LRASM long-range anti-ship missile things. And they can carry multiples of them, and they can fly across the entire ocean. You could have fleets of P-8s flying from the Aleutians, even from as far away as Hawaii, or even from the U.S., and refueling them, launching missiles at Chinese warships around Taiwan, and then flying. They could literally just fly home. They don't have to go to Japan. They don't have to operate out of Okinawa. They don't have to operate out of Guam. You know, it's like, it's really interesting. And people don't look at that airplane as a combat aircraft. But in the military, it's considered a major weapon system. And in the military, with these kinds of weapons, these P-8 surveillance aircraft, they've always had the ability to drop torpedoes, but now they would have the ability to kill aircraft carriers or kill cruisers or Chinese Type 53 destroyers. Which
is just another threat to surface warfare for the enemy, because we've got the Aegis cruisers that have that capability with harpoons and tomahawks. We have submarines that have harpoon and tomahawk capabilities. The boomers, for the most part, unless things have drastically changed, boomers are still not findable on our side. And they've been retired, but I'm sure they're just mothballed, and you know, it's probably one of them dirty little secrets that maintenance is still being done. But I'm sure that our arsenal of ASROCs, or especially our nuke ASROCs, are still sitting in a warehouse somewhere that can be deployed on a moment's notice.
Yeah.
And that is a huge deterrent, because you hang them off some of them P-8s, and you don't even have to hit the green. You just stay out of the rough and keep it in the fairway, and you're good to go there.
Yeah, I think
ASW warfare, I'm going to disagree a little bit, because common perception is modern warfare, modern naval warfare is based on carrier warfare now. And I will argue that since at least the 80s, the dirty little secret that most people don't understand is submarine and ASW, anti-submarine warfare, has actually been what's been carrying the day and is the major deterrent.
I don't disagree with that.
But because that stuff is so classified for a good reason, people don't understand that is the deterrent. The Chinese think they can take out our carriers. Common perception is carriers are a big, fat, juicy target, and you sling enough missiles at them, and we can't get them all. And that may be true.
That is true.
But you still can't find those boomers. You still can't find those fast attacks. And the missile capabilities now are so good that surface warfare people on the other side have to be very, very nervous.
Well, we took one of those Ohio class boomer. Kraken, if it's not obvious to the listener, Kraken is a Navy vet. One or two of the Ohio class boomers, because we took them out of service as nuclear weapons platforms and treaties with the Russians, and they still had a lot of service life in them. We converted them to giant Tomahawk. I think these two boomers are loaded. I think they carry 90 Tomahawks a piece. Like these things can just stay on station and shoot. I mean, it's the final load on Sunday and shoot it all week. You know.
Then the only limiting factor in submarine warfare, believe it or not, is food.
It's food, yeah.
So, you know, they have blue and gold crews and go out on 6-month deterrence patrols. That's basically between morale, but, you know, the biggest limiting factor is provisions. So there is food stuffed everywhere.
Yeah.
On submarines, and that the resupply of food provisions is really the only limiting factor. So like that story that came out, the Norwegians wouldn't refuel a submarine. That was bullshit.
Yeah, I saw that. I was making
that was
sense.
bullshit.
Yeah.
Now, if they said they refused to resupply them with fresh food and provisions, I might buy that.
Yeah.
But that is the biggest deterrent. You can find an aircraft carrier. You can find destroyers. You can find cruisers. You can bomb Air Force bases.
Yeah.
You can't find them fucking boomers. And those boomers and those fast attacks are configured in such a way that if everything else is taken off the table, you still got a world of hurt coming at you.
Well, I'm just looking at submarines in terms of a conventional war with China over Taiwan, not a second strike in the event of, like, you know.
Well, but yeah, even in a conventional non-nuclear war.
Yeah.
Just say a limited, you know, Asian Pacific encounter. The submarines are what's going to make or break the deal.
I believe that's the case. There are. What is it I was going to say? In fairness, the Navy, the U.S. Navy has realized for a while that one of the issues that was giving them real problems were these super quiet diesel subs, and what they do is they would contract with, I think it was Swedish, German, and Australian operators. Or I think they were Swedish and German-made submarines. They were diesel electric, and they're super quiet because basically they generate up power and they're running on battery. And there's a couple instances where these diesel electrics were able to get within the screen of the carrier, and they would surface right up next to the carrier to be like, "We killed you." And, you know, and like that was really concerning the Navy. That was 20 years ago. And, you know, they've been trying to solve that problem. But, you know, it's, you know, we've got, was it the replacement for the Ohio class boomer submarines is that the Columbia class that's coming online? I think it's the Columbia is what.
I think so, yeah.
And then there's the replacement for I can't always get it confused. So there was the Los Angeles. So we have the Los Angeles class attack subs that are getting a little long in the tooth. There's some newer ones still, but they had the Seawolf. That got to be too expensive. They built two of those, and
so
now
there's
they're
like a hybrid between the LA class fast attacks and the Seawolves that are supposed to be coming on.
Yeah, like maybe there's a flight, whatever. But there's a Seawolf, but then they canceled the Seawolf because the Seawolf was really designed to fight against the Soviets, and it was kind of expensive. And so now I think the next one is I think it's the Virginia class attack subs that are possibly. I could have that wrong. I haven't looked. I didn't know we were going to talk about this. But you know, we have new. Yeah, I mean, our subs are considered some of the best in the world. But you know, the Chinese, they're building a lot of shit. They're building a lot of submarines and they're building a lot of ships.
Well, but I think it boils down to numbers. You know, you have quality and you have quantity. And while the Chinese may, and I think this was very, very prevalent in the Cold War also with the Soviets, they usually beat us on quantity on a lot of stuff, like tanks. they beat us on quantity, but because of their logistical systems and such, and just overall design, we negated the quantity issue with our quality.
Yeah, I mean, I know towards the end.
And I think that's where we're going to be in a naval warfare battle with the Chinese. Numbers-wise, it may look impressive on paper, but when you start picking them apart, I think that's where our technology and our training will kick in.
I think a lot of the issues that we're discovering with the Chinese military, especially with the Chinese Navy, but in general, a lot of their military, is they're just not experienced and are not good operators of a lot of this stuff. So there was an incident, was it last year or the year before? So there was a submarine, a new submarine, and the rumor was, like, I remember it, like the crew died. It was a Chinese sub, and the crew died, and they had to drag it back to port. And it was like like they all suffocated or something. And I was like, this is weird, but like it was a new design and something happened. It's like, okay, that's fine. Well, I just heard somebody was telling, it's coming out of China, that apparently we had heard that like maybe this sub accidentally ran into an underwater net that they would put up as obstacles to keep American subs out of certain areas. And so, but now they're saying, the rumor is that the sub got stuck in this net. And so apparently this submarine, this story just surprised me. This submarine was able to deploy its own scuba divers to come out of the sub and like go out there and like cut them loose or try to cut what I'm sure when you say net, it's made out of steel. It's not rope. And so apparently the divers went out to try to fix the submarine. They were out there for a while, and then they came back to get into the sub, and no one ever let them in. And they couldn't get back, it's like knock, knock, knock or whatever, or push the button or whatever, like, because it's obviously some kind of airlock, and you got to come in, close it, and blow it, evacuate, and all that kind of stuff. And this wasn't that deep. So eventually, the scuba divers went up, and they're like, help. They somehow were able to signal or something, and then the Chinese Navy showed up, and everybody on the sub they found the sub. No one was ever responding. Everybody on the sub was dead, and they're not saying what happened. It's not really clear, but apparently the story I heard, which seemed kind of batshit, and I guess it pissed off the Chinese. Supposedly, the Chinese, to get this sub back to port, they had to hook cables up to it, and they drug it to port. So it wasn't really under control. So it basically, at some point, maybe turned sideways and kind of was being drugged right below the surface, or kind of coming up. So you could see the propeller, you could see all the planes and control surfaces and how the water would move around it. And I'm not a submariner, but apparently this was kind of, all these images were picked up by U.S. satellite intelligence. And apparently when the Chinese people that are smarter realize this, they're like, you just blew this whole fucking submarine program.
Because with all that information, they can start designing profiles to learn how to detect it.
Yeah.
Because if they can get the profiles on the wheel, they can recreate it and figure out cavitation noises and frequencies to be able to pick that up on sonar. If they can get control surfaces, they can reverse engineer them and figure out frequencies for cavitation noises, the way the water flows over the surfaces.
Yeah, they didn't say
it was the holy grail of intel.
Yeah, the story as it was relayed didn't get that specific, but basically was saying, because it was dumbed down obviously for my benefit, it was saying that all this, how the water flows over the thing, basically will enable us to get a signature on this new submarine. And apparently we've detected that somehow this information has caused a lot of drama inside of the People's Liberation Army Navy, PLAN. It's, again, super weird name. But it just was an interesting story, I thought. I have a friend who served in submarines, and this is some years ago, and he was, I don't know, he's being a cocky submarine guy.
They all are.
He goes, there's only 2 types of ships in the Navy. I'm like, what? Oh, yeah, what's that? He goes, there's submarines and there's targets. I was like, ouch.
Yep. And in my world, there's 2 types of ships in the Navy. There's surface combatants and sewer pipes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have sailors and ping jockeys.
Well, since we're talking about China, have you heard the rumors about the size of the Chinese population collapse?
We talked about this a little bit the other day on some different levels. So, from talking to you.
So the official word is, and a lot of this seems like it's rumor, but it's coming from a bunch of different sources, and I just don't know it seems too fanciful to me. But the official rumor or the official number from the Chinese government is that their population is 1.4 billion. And there's apparently all these people in China and talking about how where'd all the people go? Like in all these cities, they're like, there's no people. Like it was real busy here 5 years ago. Now it's not. Rush hour, now it's not. Up on these roads, now it's not. The shopping districts, you go to the malls, they're empty. Where are all the people? And it's like, well, there's economic issues, and people are like, they're going home to the small towns. Do you go to the small towns? All the small towns are like, where are the people? We thought they were in the cities. And you're starting to realize this is a rumor that's going around in China, and it's a rumor that could be exacerbated by their stereotypical what do you call it when you're superstitious? Yeah, there's like the year of the monkey and the black fucking whatever. There's a lot of superstition in Chinese culture right now with a bunch of negativity, but there are people in China that are saying there's no way we have 1.2 billion, we have 1.4 billion people. We have less people now than when we had 1.2 billion, and there's some people making the argument that there's less than 1 billion people in China. And I have also heard from separate sources, not even talking about the superstitious Chinese, asking about the size of where all the people go, that supposedly the population of India is now greater than China. This seems to be an accepted fact. Well, here's the question. I said on the podcast a long time ago, everybody gets a turn. And everybody gets a turn means everybody gets a turn at being right, or everybody gets a turn at sticking your finger in someone's face and telling them they're wrong. So, my point is, when you're right, don't dance on other people's losses that much, because pretty soon they'll be dancing on yours. And so here's the question. During COVID, we heard rumors of mass casualties in China, rolling mortuaries, that, people were being cremated at such levels that, it was blackening the skies. I mean, it's a little dramatic, but, there were a lot of people, like in the opening days of COVID, there were a lot of people that were getting sick and dying. And, I'm not saying this, I'm just putting this out there. In China, they didn't have the COVID vaccines that we have. They had different vaccines. Also, what the Chinese did is the Chinese also instituted a very strict quarantine policy, where you thought we were quarantined a lot in the U.S. In China, they were still quarantining a year ago, a lot of them. So a lot of people may not have even been exposed to some of these COVID diseases, or have developed immunity. Or so the question is, are people disappearing in China because they're still quarantining and hiding? Or have 400 million people died in China in the past 5 years? On top of that, you figure everyone talks about the Chinese, their birth rate dropping, and the one-child policy, and people aren't having kids, especially when you're more affluent. And you start looking at the Chinese economy, the stories you're hearing coming out of China to their economy, their birth rate, the population levels. it's crazy, some of the stuff we're hearing. You know, I'm still hearing rumors that I can't even say, I'm gonna say his last name.
Gigi.
I get a lisp or something when I try to say his name out loud. Xi Jinping. How do you say his middle name?
Let's just call him Gigi.
Yeah, Gigi. So it's Xi Ghi Ping. Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
Kung Pao Cat.
So that, like, he may not even be in charge anymore, or he may be debilitated. He may have had a stroke. That members of the Central Communist Committee and the Central Military Committee are really running the country, but they're trying to, you know, not have it like bees. Like, there's all these crazy rumors coming out of China, you know, that stuff's going on. And it's not coming from the United States. It's not coming from the defense establishment. It's not coming from the news media. It's coming from Chinese people out of China that make videos and talk, or people that live in the West and speak English, and they talk about the shit that they're seeing in China. And it's like, it's crazy what's going on in China right now.
Well, you know, we touched on this the other day, and, you know, one of the cool things that I like about our relationship is you make me think. So I spent the rest of the night in my motel room until the State of the Union address came on.
Yeah.
Thinking about this very subject, and thinking about what would be a reasonable explanation for COVID if COVID is the cause and this decrease in population is true.
Oh, that's right. We did talk. I remember.
So one of the things that I spent a lot of brain power on that night was, and we talked about how, you know, I get a little upset with people that try and say COVID was nothing more than a common cold with maybe some worse side effects. COVID was a real thing. A lot of people died from it worldwide. There's no doubt about that. Won't get into the whole vaccine thing. That's a personal issue.
Yeah, but I heard a statistic that possibly more people died from COVID than died from the Black Plague.
So yeah, but so let's make a really scientific number in America, and say a lot of people passed away from COVID.
Science.
Okay, yeah. And we're not going to get into semantics of, well, he died of heart failure and just happened to have COVID. Okay, that's like saying you died of heart failure while you were, 6 months into stage 4 pancreatic cancer. We're not going to get into semantics.
Yeah.
We're just going to say, for sake of conversation, COVID killed a lot of people in America. So here's what I spent my brain power on that night. In America, our standard of living is considerably different from that in China. We are spread out a little more. We generally have a healthier food supply. We generally have better access to medical care.
Chinese are pretty unhealthy people.
Overall, health-wise, I think in America we are superior to the Chinese lifestyle. And our medical care, I think, is a lot better simply because we get it. Yeah. We have some. The Chinese, because of their population and because of the way their geography is laid out, they live vertically.
Yeah. Most of them live along the coast.
And they live very vertically, very packed in, very small spaces. So the space that we're sitting in right now in China, the way as I understand it, could very well be split up into 3 middle-class family living units.
Probably.
And when you pack people in that tight, I could see COVID running rampant at a degree unthought of compared to what we saw in the U.S., and it was bad enough in the U.S. So it's kind of like at a school. You take any school. One kid gets the flu, and within 3 days, 70% of the school has the flu. So you take China and consider them just a giant 3rd grade class, and COVID breaks out, and we know how easily it was, especially the first variant, to spread and how lethal it could be, especially with comorbidities. I could see that getting so out of control that the only way that they could deal with it, and we heard reports where the Chinese government was actually locking people into their apartments.
Oh, that's right. They were locking
and
them in.
people
Like
were
they
actually
die.
starving to death.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
they could not get out of their 37th floor apartment because the doors have been welded shut by the government. So if you're having to go to that extreme, and obviously you need to get rid of the bodies because then other health concerns come in. The mass casualty mobile crematorium. One day Grandpa was in his apartment and we never knew what happened to him because he's air pollution now. Makes sense. It's plausible. I'm not saying it happened. I'm not saying I necessarily buy into it. But I spent a lot of brain power thinking about how they live and the level of care they receive versus here, and how bad it was here, how that could be magnified there. And, you know, correlation and causation aren't necessarily the answer, but in this particular case, it is a plausible explanation to me.
Well, and here's another one. So, okay, I'm not defending, like, you know, the way China has reacted to COVID is kind of how totalitarians react. Fauci was obviously kind of a totalitarian, so, you know, we get our own version of, like, we're just going to, you know, this elite panic. We're going to tell you what to do, and, like, that's obviously not borne out well for certain people in the United States and the Western Hemisphere on how their reputation, or looking back on the truth of how things were conducted. You know, but there's some stuff that we may not know about COVID yet. I'm getting into conspiracy. I'm just guessing here. So here's the thing. So I'm reminded of a story, and I told you this. There was when we had let me move here. This will make some room on the microphone. When modern medicine had sequenced the human genome, you know, I remember that being like, we've sequenced the whole thing, 26,000, 36,000, whatever it is. We've got the whole thing, and now we'll be able to look at people and you know, if they have a pre-existing condition, genetic disposition for certain diseases, it's going to change medicine forever. And also, when you like use these 23andMe groups, and you like take a DNA test and see, you know, are you part Native American? Are you Pocahontas? Or, you know, like you get these, you know, I'm 50%, you know, Northern European, and I'm 50%, you know, Inca Mexican or something. And so scientists had gone all around the world taking DNA samples from people. Like they would study them or ask them questions like, has your family lived here? Like, we've always lived here. We haven't immigrated from anywhere. Like, it wouldn't do a whole lot of good to go to Kenya and then sequence a person who's obviously of, you know, Indian descent from the continent of India, you know, and being like, well, you know, because they migrated. So that's how they're able to, you know, be able to tell, you know, your ancestors are from Nigeria, or you have ancestors from whatever. When they were going around doing these DNA swabs, this was in the 90s, and into the end of the 90s, I think it was, and they were in Russia. The Russians flipped the fuck out because the Russians claimed that this program was a cover to develop bioweapons to target people of specific ethnicities. And they were trying to keep these people from doing these kinds of DNA surveys in Russia and in the Russian republics. And because the Russians are paranoid and they're crazy. And also, the reality is the Russians have probably
tried to do it
themselves. And so they would be the first thing they would think of. And this is a documented fact. This is true. This happened. And the Russians freaked out over this stuff. So we know that COVID came out of a weapons lab in Wuhan, China, okay? What if it's possible? Because I'm like, if all these Chinese are dead, if there's 400 million Chinese dead, or, you know, even, you know, 600 million. I mean, the population in the United States is 380 million people. how would that happen? Why would there be so many dead? I have no proof, but there's just there's weird shit going on in China. And it's like, well, what if the Chinese military, they're like, we have discovered a virus and we can play with this, and we feel like it targets certain ethnicities. And we want to figure out how that works. So maybe we can make it target different ethnicities, or what can we do so maybe we can do things? And what if maybe they did the whole, when Fauci and Rand Paul were arguing about gain of function, what if they gain of function this thing, and turns out it's more deadly for certain Asian ethnicities, and there's a bunch more dead people in China than we actually possibly. What if they killed themselves? Again, we're into like Art Bell, or what's that guy's name, the one I hate?
That doesn't narrow it down, Marky.
InfoWars.
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones. I'm in the Alex Jones territory here, but
you're way deep into it.
I'm deep. I'm into my neck in it. Well, I'm just saying, like, there's just weird shit going on, and when I look at things, I'm like, okay, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if it's not true. But if it were to be true, how do I line up all the facts to get to the point where this supposedly crazy thing could be true? And I can't really get to this being true other than maybe something like this in China. Like, there's all these people in China that are like, where did all the people go? Where's all the population? And don't take my word for it. Get on the internet, get on YouTube, find Chinese language people making videos in China, and they keep showing these, these people complaining about, it's 5 o'clock, it's rush hour, I'm on this main road in this city, and 5 years ago it was bumper, there's never anybody here at rush hour. Mm-hmm. This is rush hour. Like, just all this, or like, you go into these giant malls and there's nobody in these malls. Like, I can't believe that somebody in China is emptying a mall and sending a dude in with a camera to somehow create some kind of disinformation campaign so some loser named Marky at John 1911 can buy it hook, line, and sinker, when the Chinese can't even stop a dude from videotaping their stealth aircraft doing test flights, and putting it on the internet. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they can't control that. But somehow they can control this. Like, I don't know. Like, yeah. I don't know what the problem is, but there's some really weird shit going on in China.
See, and I can meet you in the middle on that.
Please do, because I'm out here by myself, and I feel like I'm going to be called crazy. They're going to come take my.
You're so far down the rabbit hole. We're going to name you Peter Cottontail pretty soon. Okay. But I can get halfway there with you pretty easy. So you take the points that I touched on about how they're packed in with sardines, their lifestyle sucks health-wise. Let's assume that in Wuhan they were working on gain of function and trying to develop COVID as a bioweapon. We know, and we touched on this on a different topic earlier, that the Chinese and the Russians in particular may have technology, but aren't always the swiftest at operating it. So we're in the Wuhan lab. We're trying to bioengineer a weapon of mass destruction, a biodisease, and we've got the technology to play with that kind of shit, but we don't have the skills to do it safely. And one person walks out of there that's been contaminated unknowingly.
Yeah.
And you combine that with the lifestyle and the living conditions, and what started as a Chinese military experiment in bioweapons turns into an oh shit worldwide catastrophe. That covers what I think might have happened, what you think might have happened, and can connect the dots.
Well, the Chinese are not the first people in history to have a military, biochemical, or weapon accident that killed thousands of people. Mm-hmm. The Soviets did it, but they kept it quiet, and it kind of slowly got out after the Cold War, but we haven't really talked about it since. Yeah. So let's do the police blotter and get out of this.
Sounds good.
Okay, before we get to the blotter, say what you just said about Fort Detrick.
There's spaces at Fort Detrick in Maryland that officially probably don't exist. And our hands, I am sure I will go to my grave saying our hands are not clean when it comes to biowar technology.
No.
I just think we have better scientists, better operators, better protocols that hopefully we don't have a catastrophic, oh shit, worldwide event like the Chinese did.
For the listener at home, Fort Detrick is the base of USAMRIID, which is, I can't remember the actual acronym, but it's where the U.S. Army keeps their bioweapon research. Supposedly, it exists to come up with cures for diseases and bioweapons. So like, the
Ebola.
And they do that too. But if you're in the military and you're about to cross, a line to invade, and they've issued you an antidote that's an injectable, USAMRIID developed that. Well, how do you think they developed the antidote unless they have the actual gooey shit there that makes you sick? Well, there's a funny story about that. I had read a book some years ago, a Russian scientist who was involved in the Soviet bioweapons program, and it was towards the end of the Cold War, and we were doing all the SALT II. We were trying to show our stuff so we could show them, and then we could start doing agreements and reductions. We let Soviet bioweapons scientists into USAMRIID in Fort Detrick to look around as part of compliance things, and the Soviets were shocked to discover that we didn't have any secret bio shit there to fucking kill people with. It was all defensive, because the Soviets, being paranoid, insecure assholes, the Russians they were like, everybody's lying. And so they kept maintaining secret weapons. They were convinced that all this shit was at Fort Detrick, and they went in there. They were shocked. So it's like, I don't know. It was just an interesting story. So
yeah.
All right, we've been going for 3 hours. So let's go ahead. Let's do the police blotter, and we'll go ahead and toss it. So the first one is booby trapping illegal in Nebraska?
You mean as far as, say, booby trapping your home, so if a burglar tries to break in, he gets a snoot full of buckshot?
I would say yes.
Yes, it is illegal.
But I don't know. Are you allowed to booby trap for coyotes?
No. If it poses a danger to a human, it's considered it's unlawful.
Illegal. Yeah, booby trap. So
you can, when it comes to predator control, traditional leg hold traps, conibear traps, but they even have size restrictions on those. Mm-hmm. So the giant big tooth bear traps of the 1800s, that's illegal. But as far as booby trapping anything with a gun or explosives or punji sticks, anything like that's illegal.
So there was South Carolina. There's a story of a 34-year-old man was killed by a shotgun booby trap when he went into a vacant home, and I assume he was breaking in. And so they're still trying to figure out who set up the booby trap. But we'll have the story on the website. The second police blotter. This is out of Georgia. Man pleads guilty for blowing up his ex's house. And there's pictures of it. We'll have it on the website. And he is 67 inches tall. So he's, short king. And he also plotted to use his python to eat his ex's daughter. So he was going to blow up the house. Looks like it's a nice house. This is could be $1 million house. and eat his ex's daughter. So blew up the house and was going to murder and have the daughter eaten up with a snake, which is like some kind of Kaiser Soze shit. He pleaded to 20 years in prison. Stephen Gloucester, 38, pled guilty on Thursday to using a homemade bomb to destroy the woman's house in Richmond Hill, Bryan County. He allegedly planned with his 34-year-old roommate, Caleb Kinsley, who awaits sentencing, to kill her after. Planned with his. Who was to kill her? Okay, so Caleb Kinsley is a guy who's a co-conspirator. I'd make sure that's not the girlfriend. To kill her after she rejected him when their dating app romance ended. Ooh, this is getting sketchier and sketchier. Oh, listen to this. The pair were said to have plotted to shoot arrows into her front door, scalp her head, mail her dog feces or dead rats, blow up the home, and release a snake to eat her daughter. Well, they apparently blew up the home because they got pictures of it, and the ATF was involved. So he got 20 years. So the final police blotter, if I can find this story, because this one has been sent to me by probably 10 people because we're a little bit behind on a podcast. In Maryland, a trans vegan death cult murder ring called the Zizians has been accused of killing 6 people. Leader of trans murder ring linked to 6 deaths makes outrageous courtroom complaint. Apparently, he's super upset that he's not getting a vegan food diet in jail, and that's apparently more important than his defense. He's even said it. So Jack Ziz Lasota was arrested February 16th in Allegheny County, Maryland. After months on the run, Lasota used she/her pronouns and appeared in court February 18th and complained to the judge, stating that she might, quote, starve to death. I must starve to death. I need the jail to have a vegan diet. It's more important than this hearing is, Lasota told Judge Eric Bean, according to the audio obtained by the San Francisco Chronicle. And you're probably asking yourself, why is the San Francisco Chronicle covering a story of a trans person in Maryland in jail for murder? Because this person has killed people. They've killed people all over the country. They've killed people in San Francisco. They killed let me see here. This one's they killed a border agent, and you're thinking, oh, they killed a border agent. That's probably in California, right? No, they killed a border agent in Vermont last month. I mean, like, this whole thing, the more you read it, the worse it gets. And I'm kind of to the point where it's like, what's going on with all you trans people? Like, it's like trans violence. It used to be, when I was a kid, a tranny was just a waitress at a restaurant in Miami that seemed to be wearing an inappropriately large amount of makeup for 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
With a 5 o'clock show.
With a 5 o'clock show. No. In their defense, they tend to kind of look like women, but it was like, God, you're like, why are you wearing like Broadway makeup? Oh, it's because you're a dude. Now it's like all these trans people going around murdering people. So first we had trans people murdering people. Did you hear about the fires they had in Palisades, California, right? All the pictures of the command staff of the fire department, the fire chief or whatever.
All alphabet people.
Yeah, well, the fire chief, the woman, the lesbian woman, she's dead. Did you hear that?
No.
She was just murdered like 2 weeks ago by her lesbian.
Oh, yeah, her lesbian.
Yeah. And it's like.
Partner.
Yeah.
I suppose is the politically correct way to put it.
And apparently, if you look into this, if you do these studies and you talk about it, apparently there are now proven studies that lesbian relationships are more violent than any other, statistically, are more likely to have serious violence than any other type of male, female, he, she, form. It's just like, But you'll never see that on CNN.
Remind me, and we'll discuss this off pod and maybe bring it up next pod, but remind me to talk with you about something that happened in the Navy that actually really backs up that theory. And if you think it's pod worthy, we'll bring it up next pod.
Oh, it'll be pod worthy. I'm sure all of our Army fans will love hearing about the trans story from the Navy. So this wraps up episode 366 of the John 1911 podcast. If you want to see more stories or pictures, links of anything we discussed, please go to the website at john1911.com. That's JOHN1911.com. Remember, it's all about shooting guns and having fun. Everybody, have a good day.
Have a great Navy day.